start, Vivek.
Okay. Get the show on the road. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this Saturday morning here in India. Welcome to this webinar organized by the Association of Maritime International Commercial Interests and Expertise, MSE for short. The acronym MSE was drawn from the Latin words amicus curiae, which means a friend of the court, someone who assists the court by offering information, expertise, or insight that has a bearing on the issues of the case. MSE was established 3 years ago and is a registered society of around 50 senior professionals across the world. The last MSE webinar was recently held on marine pollution regulations. The next webinar would be focused on mariners' welfare. The first out-of-the-box topic for today is the mobilization of a reserve Indian fleet for embargoes and wars in the foreseeable future. To draw a parallel for such a need, let me briefly take you back to the year 1982, the Falklands War between Argentina and the UK. Overnight, UK mobilized a task force of 127 ships, including 43 ships of the Royal Navy, 22 of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and 62 merchant ships. The cruise liners QE2 and the Canberra were part of the merchant fleet and were used as troop carriers. They sailed 8,000 miles from the UK to the Falklands. The rest is history. UK won the war. The United States Navy maintains a number of ships as part of a reserve fleet, often called the mothball fleet. The basic requirements are constant: keep the ships afloat and sufficiently working as to be reactivated quickly in an emergency. The usual fate of ships in the reserve fleet, though, is to become too old and obsolete to be of any use, at which point they are sold for scrapping or are scuttled in weapons tests. Given this scenario, how do we address this problem here in Indian waters, with our merchant navy being considered as a second line of defense? To present their views, we have some eminent speakers who will be introduced as we go along. So please sit back and enjoy the webinar. Over to Captain Pullet, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Vivek. Let me make it short because I'm coming back for panel review. But let me set the trend by saying that we are trying to influence government policies. At the same time, let's be very clear that government policies work on socio-economic, political, vote bank issues. We may be politically and professionally correct, but that doesn't mean we get heard. So we need pressure groups. We need to be heard with good intent. That is what we are doing as a professional group. Not that other groups are not there. There are Navy, Coast Guard, and many other committees or subcommittees. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work. So let me put a caveat. All of us are free to speak. If we do happen to trample on others' toes, it is not intentional, but the toes are there. So as we pass by, we may trample. The intent is not that, to hurt any egos or power centers or anything like that. We as citizens, apart from giving a vote once in 5 years, I elect, and then the government is run by bureaucrats, it doesn't seem to work the best way we think it should. Or at least we are pointing out deficiencies and lacunae which need further attention. So let's put our heads together. Don't feel reserved too much. At the same time, be careful with your language. We will discuss all that follows in panel summary and make sure this is submitted to government properly to all people concerned. And I'm sure there are experienced people here knowing how well to handle this. Vivek, that's it from me. You can invite the next speaker, first speaker. Vivek, your mic is not on.
Speaker for today is Commodore R.S. Vasan. Commodore Vasan is an alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College and College of Naval Warfare. He has had a distinguished service of over 34 years in the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard. His appointments include command of warships, 2 naval air stations, and a long-range maritime air squadron. His shore appointments include Chief Staff Officer Operations and Regional Commander, Coast Guard Region East. He is currently serving as the Head Strategy and Security Studies at the Center for Asia Studies, Chennai. He was also the Chairman of the Aeronautical Society of India and President of the Navy Foundation in Chennai. Commodore Vasan, please.
Thank you, Captain Vivekanand. Very good morning to all of you. It's always a great pleasure being back with the sailing community, the seafarers. And when Captain Pulat spoke to me, we've known for some time. And the topic was very, very interesting. But I'm the wrong speaker if you're trying to make a case for raising an auxiliary fleet. So, let me justify thereafter as to why I say this. So, the intention is not to throw a wet blanket, but to look at the harsh realities of what we need to do. I do have few slides. I'll try and share it from here. If it doesn't work, the slides are not important. Has it come up?
Yes.
Good. Okay, this is what I would like to talk about, the Reserve Indian Fleet, Merchant Navy as second line of defense, challenges and opportunities. That's the way I would like to look at it. I think Captain Vivekanand has already set the ball rolling by bringing in the example of Falklands. I will also cover part of it a little later. And also the present state of the Sea Lift Command in USA, and also the RFAs in UK, of which I will talk about a little later. And then bring it to the kind of relevance that is required for examining the very issue of what is required in India to meet our strategic and military challenges. So, I'm happy that Captain Vivekanand mentioned the RFA. Here are some diagrams that tell you can look at the distance that was there from UK all the way to the Falklands. The Falklands was taken overnight. And, the kind of mobilization that was done under Margaret Thatcher is something that history has not seen. So, the auxiliaries, the new concept of STUFT, stuffed, that is ships taken up from trade, conversion of existing vessels, all this helped in coming to a midpoint, which is the Ascension Island, which is also just halfway through. And thereafter to mount this offensive to reclaim the island. It's something which is recorded. A lot of details are available. I'm not going to go into these details. The idea is to tell you that a determined nation, with the help of the Navy, with the help of the Merchant Navy, can achieve its strategic objective. Now, here are some pictures of, what all is the concept. The concept is to convert a Merchant Navy, take it up, spend some money, make it as a ro-ro vehicle, convert it into a helicopter carrying deck. In the case of Falklands, they also carried some of the ships to carry the Harriers and operate the Harriers, because the advantage of the Harrier was it's a jump jet. That means it's a short takeoff and vertical landing. In this case, they were required to take off vertically and land vertically, and therefore the payload limitations were there. But what you see bottom, at the bottom is the ro-ro used after conversion of Argus, which is also used in the Iraq war as a hospital ship. So there are plentiful opportunities the moment you have total control of how you want to go about the conversion and keep it ready to be used in times of war. So this is the contender Bezant. In 1995, UK government spent 13 million pounds for making it as an aviation training ship. So it's not that they just stopped with the Falklands and they realized that here is perhaps a cost-effective solution. Instead of using a huge carrier like Virat or Vikramaditya, as well use something for training, initial training, particularly for helicopters and jump jets, so that the cost of training is brought down. So I'm just giving you all these examples to tell you how the concepts have evolved over the period of years. Now you can see the number of aircraft which are taken all the way from Ascension Island all the way to Falklands and launched them. It is something that is phenomenal that has been achieved by Falklands, because they did have two aircraft carriers, but the additional reserve aircraft that were required, additional helicopters that were required, could not have been taken but for this conversion, which was done in such an imaginative manner. This is Atlantic conveyor. Unfortunately, this went down to an attack by two Exocet missiles, which the Atlantic Air Force launched on them. And here is the board of inquiry. This is recent. In fact, the complete report on this was updated in 2020, just last year. So this was what the board of inquiry report said, that the helicopter carrying merchant ship that sank with the loss of 12 men, he was hit by two Exocet missiles in 82 Falklands, was unarmed. Please note all this. Unprotected, because Modi lawyers feared that it was illegal to commercial vessels with weapon systems. That means illegal to fit commercial vessels with weapon systems, and according to newly released classified documents. So this was released sometime last year, after the mandatory number of years when it remains classified. What reason I want to highlight this is that it's all right to say that we'll equip them, we'll put merchant navy officers and sailors there, they'll sail them. But what are the legal provisions? So you got to be careful about what the legal provisions are before you commit them to war. In support roles, as an independent merchant navy which is unarmed, the issue is very different. But even unarmed ships did not have insurance, as we noticed in the Iraq-Iran war. The number of ships that were either hit or sunk is phenomenal. It is not that they were innocent vessels. The point is that at a particular stage, the flag of the vessel was changed. Some of them started having the US flag to seek an insurance from the ongoing missile war. Now this is the Atlantic Causeway. Imagine this is the kind of record that they have: 4,000 hello landings, 500 fueling, and 2 million British pounds was all that was used for conversion. So with that, when you look at the total cost of operation, because a warship is weapon intensive, equipment intensive, and manpower intensive. So if you can substitute some of the tasks, peacetime tasks particularly, it's a good option to look at. Let's look at this. This is the USA. I think Captain Vivekananda also initially mentioned about the reserves that are there. This is the reserve fleet. Had 2,277 ships in layup in 1950. Please mark these numbers and how these numbers have come down. In 2003, 274. In July 2007, 230 ships. And in 20, just last year, the number came down to 18. Why? Yeah, of course, here they were all parked in some rivers in Susan Bay and here in California and other places. But the point is that lack of maintenance, natural aging, obsolescence, lack of manpower to keep this going, and the effort required to convert it and put it to sea is something phenomenal. And we need to be conscious when we make any such recommendations for having a reserve fleet. So these are the examples which are there. The Sea Lift Command, which is still there. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary, which is still there. But yes, like I said, with a diminished role, and there is some talk in UK of even scrapping this entire concept altogether. So these are some of the mothball ships, as was brought out. This is in California. So the last one which you see on the right is somebody has to switch off his. Yeah. Okay. Now let's come to the last part. That is just to provoke the audience so that we can have more discussion. So what is it that we can do in India in the backdrop of some of the things that I'm about to highlight? Indian Jugaad is famous, so we can beat the British at their own game. And Atmanirbharata, of course, has a lot of question marks. And I have always said that we've not gone beyond the first letter A in terms of our Atmanirbharata, but that is the way to go in any case. So these are the issues that we must keep in mind, because I'm the first speaker. So I thought it fit to flag these issues, and in the light of what I'm going to bring up, then discuss the entire issue, dispassionately. One is, of course, to understand what is the area of operation for India, which has been identified in the Maritime Doctrine of India. It came out in 2005, then 7, 2009, 2013, and 2015. This has been reviewed. You can have a look at this. So what is our area of operation? Of course, theoretically, it is from the east coast of Africa all the way to Australia, which covers the Indo-Pacific region. But what is your role there? And what is the cost that if you have to raise a auxiliary fleet that is standing by for a war that may happen or may not happen. The last major war we fought was 1970. So from 71, presuming that you had an RFA of about, let's say, even 30 ships, what would have happened to those ships? How would you have maintained them? Then, of course, resources and manpower to maintain this reserve fleet, which is the example that I told you, which is very important. That even a big country like USA has brought down those numbers to just about 90. Obsolescence of the ships, the equipment, the communication equipment, the navigation equipment, the ECDS, whatever you talk about, all this requires constant upgradation, time, effort, money, and energy. Then foundational agreements. This is something that is important to us. We want to extend our range, number one. We want our fleet to be supported, number two. We want them to be effective in their operational, number three. How is this being achieved? Today, we have foundational agreements with USA, with Singapore, and many more are going to be on the pipeline. This allows mutual support of ships when they are in operating area beyond the radii of the host country. That is, I'm talking about India. If it is operating beyond, let's say, in the South China Sea for whatever reason, theoretically, then it needs to be supported. So you're going to have those bases open to you. You're going to have fuel supplied perhaps from a US auxiliary or from a UK auxiliary or from a France auxiliary. And so therefore these agreements such as the Limova would come very handy. And so whatever you would like to make in terms of recommendation has to take these factors into consideration. Then the most important is not SFC, it is SPC, Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, I'm sure all of you are aware, during the first time of Vajpayee government, this decision was taken to ramp up and have enough stock of petroleum and crude. So they created a storage of some 5.53 or 5.6, whatever. The figures are available, they're not important. 5.6 million metric tons. Okay. And now the recent decision has been taken to take this up to 15.8 million metric tons. That means the combined capacity of the refineries who have their own fuel and this strategic reserve which has been created in Visakhapatnam, in Udupi, near Udupi, and in another place will meet the requirement of the country for 87 days. That's a calculation. It's all there. There's no secrets there. So if that is the capability that you have in terms of keeping your refineries going, in terms of the crude requirement that is there, then your requirement now only revolves around supporting the ships which are out at sea in an operational mission. It could be against China, it could be against Pakistan, or any other adversary. How are you going to support them? Here is where the geographical advantage that India has comes very handy. Look at the Andaman Nicobar, strengthen it, keep a lot of reserve there, deploy ships from there, deploy aircraft from there. It increases the range in your areas of interest. Likewise, strengthen Lakshadweep Minicoy, which is on the western flank, the southwestern flank. And so these are some of the solutions that are available to India, which is not available to even China, for example. And therefore, this is where we have to now have a 5-year plan, augment infrastructure, have storage facilities, and some of the strategic petroleum reserve that I spoke about earlier should be shifted to both Lakshadweep Minicoy and also the Andaman Nicobar so that you are able to wage war without any hassles and without any worry about will I run out of my supplies. Please remember, this question is not relevant only to oil, petroleum products, water, food, etc., but it's also about the critical war supplies. I'm talking about missiles, of guns, of tanks, of whatever else you require, which is a different kettle of fish, which the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Air Force, the Army, and all know how to handle. That's where they're going for what's called the war wastage reserve. The war wastage reserve is a concept where you actually cater for additional equipment to be brought in, bought, procured, catered for. It's almost like the auxiliary reserve fleet which is there. So we have this option of stuffed, that is ships taken up from trade. We did that during 71. I was there in 71 war. Many of the ships, Captain Vivekanand will know, many of the ships were converted. In fact, some of them were fitted with small guns. They also had depth charge rails for self-defense. But the moment you fit a weapon, the legal issues of whether it is an innocent merchant ship or whether it is now a ship that can be taken on as a target is something. And particularly when you have ambulance ships, and all that, then it becomes even more critical. So we've done this before. We evacuated people from Libya the war on Libya. Recently, we have again taken people using warships, using Jalashwa. Jalashwa, incidentally, is a Austin-class vessel which was mothballed by USA, which we bought. But it has done a great job of evacuating people, from tsunami till the recent which was there. And SEA, I'm sure all of you have monitored that SEA has already indicated that it's going to sell out the entire government shares. So who's going to manage it? What is the control that you have except to request for the ships or get them? Like even in for evacuation of the ships, we had commissioned 2 ships, merchant ships, for bringing people from Libya and other places. So the Indian Navy and Coast Guard vessels, which are designed, or something which is fitted for, fitted with. There are 2 areas. That is, one is fitted with, that means it comes out as a full package. Other is fitted for, that means plug and play. In times of emergency, a survey ship can become a hospital ship. It can also become, aviation fuel carrier. It can also carry spares. And also there are other options which are being used for aerial drop of essential supplies, critical supplies, which are not very, very voluminous or very heavy. So these, I thought, were some of the issues that I must identify. I don't know how much more time I have because I have many more slides and I would not like to show that, except perhaps during the discussion to make my point as and when there is some point that is raised. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Commodore Vasan. Our next speaker for today is Mr. Hajra. Mr. Hajra was the chairman and managing director of Shipping Corporation of India. He graduated from the University of Calcutta with a BSc Chemistry degree and completed his MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, before joining the Shipping Corporation of India. He also completed a degree in law from University of Calcutta. In addition to his job at SCI, Mr. Hajra has held important positions in industry organizations and institutions such as Indian National Shipowners Association, International Shipping Federation, and the World Maritime University. Mr. Hajra, please.
Thank you very much, Captain Vivekanand. I also thank my good friend Suri Pulat and all other organizers for inviting me, which affords me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with all of you today. First and foremost, I must admit that when Suri, he has been in touch for this webinar for a long time, but when he ultimately requested me to deliver a talk, because earlier he said I'll be just a part of a panel. Then he said, no, I have to deliver a talk, and that too for 15 minutes, a so-called sort of keynote address. I said, look, I will not be able to present slides, PPT, which always becomes handy. As they say, one picture is worth 1,000 words. So that will be my limitation. But nevertheless, since you have requested, I agree to talk on this subject. Though I must mention that the entire concept of reserve fleet and whatever we call it, as already touched very well by Commodore Vasan and Vivekanand also in his opening remarks, they all relate only to defense and to the Navy, naval force, rather than to the merchant Navy. And we have the concepts, as already mentioned. I will not repeat them, of firstly UK, followed by USA and even some other countries, of the concept of reserve fleet, concept of Sea Lift Command, concept of NDRF, concept of RRF, and so on and so forth. But all these relates to basically, a fleet which is normally mothballed and kept in sort of readiness, that in case there is an war or something, they can be immediately put into action. I will only confine my talk to the relevance of, I would say not exactly reserve fleet, but the relevance of merchant fleet for any nation, particularly for a nation like India. Of course, here again, I will just mention that, as an Indian, it always gives me a great pride that we are the only nation in the world after which an ocean has been named. And to this very, very august gathering, I don't have to relate anything, relating to the, glorious maritime heritage and past of our nation. But unfortunately, when we look at today, we see not only in various other economic fields, but even in the in the maritime field, we see that from a very glorious past, we have substantially, come down in the sense. Let me first mention that at one time, as we know, the Indian GDP was about 20% of world GDP. Today, we are struggling to reach even a 3% mark. And as far as the maritime fleet is concerned, our rank today has come down to about 16 or thereabout in terms of the GTE or DWT. But if we look at the world seaborne trade, which is about 11 plus billion tons, maybe in 2020, it has slightly gone down because of the pandemic and things like that, but it was at that region of 11 billion plus tons and about 60 plus thousand ton miles in 2019. So if we look at that, then we will see that the Indian EXIM trade, which is about a billion ton, that's about 10% of the world trade. But if we look at Indian fleet, it's just about 1% that of the international fleet. So there is a huge mismatch, because of which every year there is at least about $50 billion being spent towards freight to the foreign lines. Of course, today, the so-called complete self-reliance is just not even envisageable. So obviously there will be definitely foreign tonnage, but whether our share, which was about 40% in the mid-80s, the share of Indian lines, today it has come down to barely 7%. And that 7% is also thanks to the at least crude carriage, where crude and product, our share is about 12-13%. But otherwise, if you look at dry bulk, if you look at containers scenario, it is really pathetic. So definitely that is something which we have to look at more, because there are a number of studies. I can only just mention here in the short time, one or two of them, like the UNCTAD study, which very clearly established that the countries which have more control on their maritime tonnage, for them, the incidence of freight to the landed cost, either for their import into their own country or for the exports in the foreign countries, is always lower. For the gross average, it is somewhere today, I understand, about 5-6%. But for the developed countries, particularly those who control the tonnage, like of course you have the biggest, of course, coming from Greece, then Japan, then now of course China, Norway, all these countries, for them, the incidence of freight to the landed cost for either import and export is less. Whereas for the developing countries, it goes up to 8%. For India, I understand it goes up anywhere between 8-9% at least, if not more. So that is one. Secondly, there was an INSA, Indian National Shipowners Association study through TERI, which also established that for every one deadweight tonnage that is added to the country's fleet, there is definitely an economic benefit in terms of GVA, gross value added. For 1 ton, it was calculated somewhere close to $50 in those days. And also 1% increase in the Indian fleet increases the GDP to the extent of 0.0023%. This is, of course, an old study, needs to be updated if anyone wants to use this particular model. But nevertheless, now that our economy is close to $3 trillion, 0.0023%, if you calculate, you will find that's a huge figure, and that's a real positive boost to India's GDP. Coming to certain other aspects, why the national fleet is extremely important. And here, to some extent at least, it is akin to the concept of reserve tonnage. That is basically a core tonnage for the nation, which can be put into action almost at no notice in case of any war and strife. The first aspect I will cover is the maritime security. Of course, Commodore Vasan is there, Admiral Gupta is there. I have seen quotations by CNS, the Chief of Naval Staff, not one of them, at least 3 of them, who have clearly said that since India is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world in terms of maritime security, unfortunately, because of our geopolitical situation vis-a-vis our neighbors. The best way to improve maritime security is to increase the national tonnage on the Indian coast. As we all know, the foreign ships, of course, that's a matter of pride. I'll mention that I'll mention it now. It's a matter of pride that foreign tonnage has, a large percentage of Indian seafarers as well. As I said some time back, the Indian tonnage is just about 1% that of the world tonnage, but India supplies close to 9 to 10% of seafarers to the global fleet. So this is a matter of great pride. Indian seafarers are considered to be second to none in the world, and we take a great pride in that. But nevertheless, as I was saying, the foreign tonnage normally also has a lot of foreign crew. And as we know, it is of course not practical that, if you insist on a foreign ship coming with foreign crew to your coast, and you require the so-called security clearance for all those crews, it will be absolutely unworkable. The entire, world seaborne trade will come to a grinding halt. So obviously that system is not there. But here I cannot resist the temptation of mentioning one thing, which at least at the INSA's level, we really pointed out to the powers to be, the government, but then nothing was done. At one particular time, even the Indian ship owners, despite having such a large, seafaring community in India, did face some shortage, particularly for the management level officers. As you all know, I'm sure all of you do, that management level officers, the first four, that is the master, chief engineer, the mate, the chief officer, and the second engineer. So it was suggested that under the Indian Merchant Shipping Act, an Indian ship must necessarily only employ Indian crew, that is officers and ratings. So we suggested that there should be some relaxation. Just like the Indian seafarers can work, of course, on any fleet, similarly, we should have some relaxation, particularly since at that point of time, there was some shortage. Even that shortage in the management level has always created problem for world ship owners. While there can be quite a bit of surplus in the lower ranks, for the upper rank, there is always some problem. So the government of India allowed inside that stage, I don't think that is, that has remained valid, that up to 2 officers Indian ship can deploy, provided they are given security clearance. So the whole scheme really fell flat because the security clearance, it's time, and then you can't expect a seafarer to wait that long, not in employment, but to see whether he gets the security clearance. The whole thing didn't work. But we found it ridiculous that so many foreign crew members are across our coast on the foreign tonnage. And some of those ships have remained on the coast for 5-6 months at a stretch. Obviously, there cannot be a concept of security clearance. But Indian ships, having so many Indian complements, if they want to deploy just 2 foreign officers, they require this security clearance. Anyway, forget that. As I was saying, that this is one thing, maritime security, which really improves if you have higher percentage of national tonnage across your coast. The second, which is possibly even more important, it has been touched upon by Commodore Vassan in a different way, is the energy security. When there was some talk about undersea pipeline for both oil and gas between Qatar, between Oman and India, I have come across statements from the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas saying that this is of strategic interest to the country. So government would like to keep some control on this by having direct stake being held by companies like ONGC and IOC. But it has never ever been really recognized. But shipping is nothing but a floating pipeline. So if for the pipeline you require government control, then why doesn't it apply to shipping? Secondly, as you know, all of you know that for energy security, government has taken a decision of trying to raise India's stake in some of the overseas oil mines, gas fields, etc. Now, unless you have your own tonnage to ensure that in times of war, strife, and other things, you have the capacity to bring those oil and gas being developed overseas to your own shore, where is it improving your energy security? And which country other than India can be so very worried about energy security? Because in India, more than 80% of the crude requirement is met through imports. India, as you all know, has emerged as the third largest oil consumer in the world, next only to USA and China. And in terms of import, possibly soon, India will even surpass USA, because USA also has emerged to be world's possibly the biggest, oil producer. They are producing more than 11 million barrels per day. So obviously, India needs this energy security possibly more than most of the other countries. Then, of course, another point which has been touched upon by Commodore Vassan already is the question of, in case of war and strife, the question of the evacuation of Indian citizens who are stranded somewhere where there is a war breakout or there are disturbances. Of course, I forgot to mention one more thing as an example while I was talking about energy security. If we go back, not too much, but just about a few decades in the history, in the times of Iran-Iraq war, in the times of Gulf War, and if we study, we'll find that just before the war broke out, the Indian tonnage used to carry somewhere only at about 67% of the requirement of the crude to India. During the war and strife, Indian tonnage carried 99% of the crude requirements. If I may say so, it was entirely the Indian tonnage which kept the lifeline of the Indian economy by keeping the oil and products, the crude and products flowing into the country smoothly. I also will just take a few seconds in mentioning that there was a situation because of the difficulties. One of SCI ship was hit by a missile. There was a situation when the Seafarers Forum went to the extent of thinking of issuing a blanket advice to their members not to go to the Gulf region because of the dangers involved. At that time, to boost the morale of the ship's complements, my predecessor, Sri LMS Rajwar, who is no more, he sailed with a tanker. And these things have not really been publicized ever, but he sailed with a tanker all the way to the Gulf to boost the morale of the seafarers. And these things you can never expect from a foreign operator. This can only be done by Indian operator. So obviously, I personally feel, and of course, as I have already mentioned about the economic benefit, a dollar of freight earned by an Indian operator, 67-70 cents out of that gets plowed back in the Indian economy, whereas barely 10 cents earned by a foreign owner and foreign operator out of their dollar of freight earned gets plowed into the Indian economy. As we all know, shipping has a great multiplier effect to the extent of 2.53. So obviously that is a very, very positive thing for the Indian economy as well. If you can increase your tonnage, and if you can, I'm not saying we can go back to 40% of the carriage today, because as I have already mentioned, 1 billion tons of Indian exim trade. It's a tall order for the Indian fleet to cater to 40%. But if from the present 7%, we can even raise it to 15%, it will be a great boost to the economy. It will greatly improve the energy security, greatly improve the maritime security, and definitely, I think, overall for the nation, which has such a glorious past and heritage, it will be something which everyone should look forward to. I don't think I have too much time left, so I'll stop at this. And during the panel, if there are questions, I'll be very happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hazra. Over to you, Kamal, to introduce Jagmeet.
Thank you, Captain Vivekanand. Reading me loud and clear?
Yes, we read you.
Yes. Yes. Jagmeet Makkar. I'm taking his name very informally over here. I'm giving the Mr. out. I know him so well. Jagmeet Makkar is a marine engineer and MSc member, and he is into dispute resolution in a big way. He is chairman of ICS Hong Kong and director Skills Plus. His topic today is controlled tonnage, focal point of maritime ecosystem. Please welcome Mr. Jagmeet Makkar.
Thank you very much,
Jagmeet,
Kamal.
over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kamal, Captain Pulat, Captain Vivekanand, Mr. Hajra, Commodore Vasan. Thank you very much for making my 5 minutes so easy for me now. We have covered almost everything which should have been covered. Thank you so much for that. I'm only going to add on to it from one point that Mr. Hajra mentioned about the multiplier 2.53. That shows how important the tonnage is. What I am going to talk about it, not just the Indian tonnage, but I want to focus on the Indian controlled tonnage. And we know that the controlled tonnage is essential to build and expand the entire maritime ecosystem around it. And in my humble view, the Indian controlled tonnage may include the national tonnage, as we call it, the future tonnage in India through the bareboat lease structures, if at all that comes into being, and as well as establishing Indian International Maritime Register, which I am looking at as a second register, not as a flag of convenience. There are a few misconceptions, or I would say that misleading perceptions that discourage progress in those areas. Some of these are, I'm going to look at only two of these. Then during panel discussion, maybe the panelists can look at it more, expand these further. Ships owned by an Indian or an Indian company, but registered in a foreign country or jurisdiction is Indian controlled tonnage. The fact is no, it is not. It is a flag state that may have the requisition rights on that ship and not India, because it's not Indian flag ship. Hence the DG order number 10, dated 23rd of October 2014, may be reconsidered to help prevent the tonnage drain, while urgent changes need to be made within India to provide a level playing field to our Indian owners. Second misconception that I normally hear is that second register is a flag of convenience, similar to Panama, Liberia, etc. The fact is, no, it is not. A second register actually is a response of the maritime nations to the flags of convenience. Examples are Marshall Island, which is second register of the United States. Another example of such a maritime nation's response to a flag of convenience is the REG. It's called the Red Ensign Group, which comprises of a family of flags such as Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, BVI, Cayman Islands, Gibraltar, Isle of Man, which is supposed to be right on top of the white list of the port state, United Kingdom, etc. My point is, if United States and United Kingdom can take such progressive steps to ensure that they continue to control tonnage, why should we not? Or why can we not? We have large coastal cities and islands which may be used as a family of flags or registers. As I proposed earlier during my discussions or deliberations in the MIV 2030, when we were developing that, we may consider TCG. TCG is the tricolor group, which may comprise of, say, Mumbai, Goa, Pondicherry, Port Blair, amongst others. Just like the Red Ensign Group, the existing Indian tonnage may form part of our tricolor group as the Indian national flag. Each of these registers shall have uniform quality control, like you have in the REG, the Red Ensign Group, and best practices, international best practices, but different offerings to make Indian as well as foreign owners to register ships under the flags of the TCG. To end, I was given 5 minutes, so I'm trying to be within that. To end, sharing a few thoughts, the nationality of the ships registered under the Indian International Shipping Registers of the TCG will be Indian. The flag that the vessels will fly is that of India, irrespective of the nationality of the beneficial owner. India shall have the right to requisition the ships in line with the international practices and the applicable Indian law. The benefits given to and requirements of the registry are to be based on international standards and best practices. The key point is that in order to be a power at the world stage, we need to be better in terms of how and what we offer and not through restrictions. A dream maybe, but I think we must be moving towards that, and we are moving towards that. And with that, I think I just finished within 5 minutes, and Captain Pullat may be happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagmeet. Yes, I think everyone will be happy. We all like to see time being kept. Our next speaker is Mr. K. Shankar. Mr. Shankar, I have worked with him. I spent some office time with Mr. Shankar in the mid-90s. So I have the privilege of introducing him from a standpoint of familiarity as well. Mr. Shankar is a veteran marine engineer of 50 plus years, ashore with Cisco, SR, Sanmar, West Asia, and he has been former president, shipping division of India Cements Limited. Mr. Shankar is on the governing council of IAPI, and Mr. Shankar's topic is tonnage concerns. Please welcome Mr. Shankar.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. The topic given to me by Suri was a disaster or a contingency faced by India. How ready are we in the maritime sector? So confining myself to the maritime sector, let me touch upon the various disasters that India have faced. If Kirtan can quickly present the slides. Yeah, run them over. 20 seconds for each slide, please. The scientific research have established that society has slowly become to recognize that various calamities that have occurred over past decades that India have faced, which necessitated the study of what we need to undertake, the characteristics of each disaster, the predictability, and what we need to do. This has changed over time, and we are still learning from this process. Next. Let us look at the recent past, the cyclone Tauktae and the massive damages that has occurred to ONGC and the barge. Events have proved that ONGC failed to alert the 5 vessels which were contracted, including the barge, and SOPs were not followed. Platform safety too was compromised. The Indian Navy captain of INS Kolkata did mention that the condition of sea was so severe, the vessel should not have been there. That means these vessels were not alerted to move away to safety. Next. The post-disaster findings of this Bombay High, though at the present moment it is under the inquiry of DG Shipping and Director General of Hydrocarbon, the matter of fact remains that there are several flaws that have occurred, several safety procedures that have been compromised, and then dump barge, there was no tug visible in the near vicinity to be prepared to haul out the dump barge to a safe position. So in spite of the master having presumably signaled for help on the 15th of May itself. These are all indicators that India is not ready yet to face a disaster and not yet ready to have contingency measures. Next. What have all these revealed? The factors that are coming very in the knowledge of every citizen here is that observation and monitoring of every characteristic has not happened. There is room for research to improve the knowledge of everybody, every incident, and that has not been put in place. Infrastructural consideration have not taken up. The government of India has necessarily got to invest a lot of money toward information and the furnishing of infrastructure necessary for disaster warning, as well as preventive hazard indicators. Disaster prepared framework that was not there. Now let us confine ourselves to shipping. In US, they have a federal emergency agency in place, and they have a manner whereby a month in the year is declared as the emergency month, whereby all the preventive exercises are taken up as a routine. From a pharmacy, from that respect, you can say US is a developed country. Whereas India, we claim to be the pharmaceutical hub. But the recent pandemic has revealed that we are in a total mess. We were in a health crisis. There were no medicine at hand, no injections readily available, and we had to bank on foreign import of urgent medical supplies and life-saving drugs, including from Kenya. India was caught off guard, but we were ready with contingency measures in quick time. And that in that respect, we must compliment the self-help groups of the Indian youth who spring into action to overcome all these. There is a Disaster Management Act by the Government of India, which is in place, and also it covers cyclone, flood, tsunami, drought, air and maritime disaster. But the Disaster Management Committee under a cabinet minister is centrally focused, and it has got subcommittees in all the states. But the Ministry of Home Affairs announced enforcement of the Disaster Management Act to facilitate interstate transport movement during the second wave of this pandemic. But factually, no sign was ever visible to all of us of such a interstate control was exercised. Neither was this management committee was in force, nor was any central command in existence in Delhi. Actually, once bitten, twice shy. Few states like the Greater Mumbai Corporation and Kerala and Tamil Nadu sprung into action. The systems were put in place, and the disaster management was set in motion. But this cannot be as an emergent measure. There has to be a standing procedure for management of all these as a future measure. So lack of understanding, awareness against policymakers, officials down the line, apathy for coordinating efforts reveal system out of tune with realities. Life has become valueless in India. Next. India has got a large coastline, and Ministry of Shipping has an effective role because India's security as well as vulnerability along the coast is very much there. We are aware our neighbors are China, Pakistan on one side, China on the other side. We are concerned with China's proximity to Sri Lanka, and we are concerned with China's proximity to Pakistan. There is a good possibility of an embargo whereby we are threatened to access Persian Gulf. So are we ready in a global emergency, in a warlike situation, whether our terminals like HPCL, IOC, and the BPCL have storage facilities to have enough product stored to last us for a month during the contingency. Are we ready for it? Have the ministry mobilized the Indian fleet to cater to the coastal movement of products, like diesel as well as petrol, or even container vessels for essential movement of cargo from one coast to coast? Declaration of essential ports, 2 in the west coast like Mumbai and Cochin, and 2 in the east coast like Chennai and Vizag as contingency port in case of an emergency. Depending on the area where the emergency is, the national authority can identify these are the identified ports, and the contingency measures are implemented in that particular port to the necessary action to be taken. Next. So far, even during this pandemic, the shipping and logistics could have taken a very active part instead of jumbos in hundreds flying across the world to bringing in medical equipments and products, life-saving drugs into India. We could have moved these through containers either from the Gulf or from Singapore in double quick time in 3 to 4 days. And if you had involved shipping and logistics, even intermodal transportation would have been much better facilitated rather than all these essential drugs getting stocked up in the warehouses and lying there for weeks. That could have easily been avoided. All these are due to lack of mobilization of warlike situation and teams with a central in command in Delhi and command distributed across the state to various heads so that they identify these contingency teams. I think there is a need for formulating maritime contingency policy. I think the professionals need to be included in such a policy whereby they can play a very active part in formulating the policy and the role of the ports, the shipping, as well as the mobilization of personnel to be actively involved, including those of logistics to be actively involved in case of an emergency. Next. Next. If you remember, sometime during the year 2011, there was a civil war in February, March, Egypt, Tunisia, and that spread to Libya. There was an urgent call from Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Shipping seeking help of marine professionals in Chennai to explore possibilities of deploying a passenger vessel to repatriate stranded Indian citizens from Libya from port of Benghazi to Alexandria in Egypt. In less than 48 hours, a ship was identified, and in coordination with both the ministries, SCA was nominated as the manager of this vessel, and our professionals sailed with this vessel, Scotia Princess, that made 2 trips to repatriate 2,159 stranded Indians from Libya, including 10 infants, to land them in Alexandria. To cut long story short, a miracle was achieved. This is a national disaster management in true letter and spirit. This is what is called coordination. And such a coordination has to be mandated in a preventive management procedure. The committee has to be formed as far as shipping policy are concerned that will include these contingency measures to be documented, involvement of various sectors of the shipping sector, and so that they can all be put on alert by the central agency through the State Department or the Port Department. For a developed nation, India's need for emergency preparedness is very critical. Systems need to be in place. Each sector will need to be aware of its role to play. Pertinent to note, National Disaster Management Procedure has no role for Ministry of Shipping. We have gone through the procedures in complete. Every ministry is linked to the Ministry of Home except the Ministry of Shipping. I wonder why and how it got missed out. With the vast coastline, role of shipping and logistics is very crucial. For a national disaster management plan, the inclusion of Minister of Shipping and Transport is very, very critical. Next. There was a mention that reserve fleet. What is the reserve fleet? Yes, US had a reserve fleet of 5% of the total merchant fleet to kept in reserve. They had the port of refuge identified, and these vessels are on standby mode, banked to be ready at a moment's call to respond to a global contingency movement for commercial needs. India is a sensitive area. We cannot be like US to have a reserve fleet. It is not possible in the near future. So what is the next alternative that we can think of? Next alternative is identify that what are the assets like IOC, what they need to do, what are the ships that are required to be handled in a contingency. We are in the process of selling SCI. It is a national asset, and not only a national asset, it is a national carrier as well. And it would have been very useful for our contingency movement. Now you sell away an asset, a profit-making asset like this, where do we go? We have to go into the market to identify, so that you identify now in your contingency plan. You decide what type of ship that you need. You need product tankers for coastal movement. You need crude carriers for shipment of crude, or your oil field is capable of producing crude that will last for a month for India's needs, or do you need to identify the type of ship that is required, identify the owner, and tell them we will give you 1 week's notice or 15 days notice that will be mobilized for national emergency. So these have to be identified in the contingency policy, whereby these feeder container lines can carry essential commodities from port to port. We can import essential from port like Singapore to either to Tuticorin or to Chennai, depending on where the comfort zone of the coastline is, so that these can be again distributed at the national level through the smaller vessels. And ports need to be identified for an emergency, be it Chennai, be it Tuticorin, be it Bangalore, be it Goa, be it Mumbai, Chennai, Vizag, or Paradip. You need to identify 4 ports to be called as emergency port at the discretion of the Central Command, and they have to be prepared at short notice to have personnel, management, the equipment, machinery, ships, all ready in hand at a moment's notice. Next. The need for involvement of marine professional for drafting out the policy cannot be overemphasized. I have already mentioned about SCI. According to my own opinion, to suit the country's needs, the essential needs of product tankers, to suitable the size and draft of the vessel, container feeder vessel to move from port to port, then harbor crafts, tugs, utility service boat that is required for the emergency contingency port that have been identified, pilot boats and service launches, and disaster management ports and disaster management command and control to be identified suitably. In my personal opinion, command and control, although it is a national disaster, if it can be entrusted to the defense personnel, that I think would be better handled, because they have the unique decision-making process where command and control are better handled, so that these can all be stipulated in the policy. In this line, I would highly recommend involvement of the professionals in this process, and I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. Captain Pullet, we move into panel discussion. You don't have much time. You may think of merging with Q&A.
Okay, thanks everybody. Don't worry about time. As it happens, I have provided for some spare time. We are into 65 minutes now. We planned 70. In fact, 90 we can stretch up to. We have a very important second session, but nevertheless, we will try to be a little more time conscious now, between now and let's say 11 o'clock, so that questions are not ignored. But before that, let me just touch upon the previous speakers, what they said before we get into real panel discussion. I would request Commodore Watson to come up with what exactly the Navy wants as a reserve fleet. For example, how many tankers, how many bulk carriers, how many gas tankers, how many passenger vessels, how many landing crafts, for example. That done, let me thank Mr. Hazara for delivering the keynote address. It so happened that the INSA president, Mrs. Sujata Naik, withdrew with very short notice. So I had to return to Hazara, who had the experience, and I'm very happy we got the right person. He has given us the multipliers of economics on the Indian fleet. So that's where we stand. And thanks to Shankar for bringing up so many issues. Oh, before I forget, the SCI CMD sailing on a tanker must be one of those one for Guinness Book of Records, I suppose. Incidentally, some of you might remember that SCI VLCC got hit of Karg. I don't know if it was Koyali or Kanchenjunga. One of them did get hit. It was a legal case, which I remember. Coming back to strategic reserves, what Shankar said, I don't know if it's top secret, but L&T has dug a big hole underground of Vizag. We do have strategic reserve. And one more to add, Shankar mentioned about Libya rescue effort. Our members, I must say proudly, Captain Venkat and Rajgopal were physically involved with that craft in helping those refugees, and a lot of ladies and children were there, as Shankar mentioned. And some of the questions I have seen, but that Kamal will handle that. But basically, we are wondering whether we will have an emergency or whether we need this. But I think that has been brought up by saying we got two coasts, we got Himalayas to the north, nowhere we can run. Our civilization itself was landlocked till the Cheras and Pandyas and all went east, and the Western civilization came, so to say, the Western marine adventures came to the West Coast and then East Coast, and that's long history. But do we need reserve fleet? 100%, because embargo, if we get cut off, the shores get cut off, the beaches get cut off, we are stuck with a huge population to feed. We need fertilizers, we need oil, we need gas, we need coal, we need everything that is required for peaceful living, unless you want riots, of course. So there is no question whether we need a fleet. Only thing, it has to be earmarked. How do we do it? It's the next question. I don't want to answer all the questions, but I would like to invite Patnaik. I suppose he's there. Can somebody unmute his mic? Captain Patnaik is in Dubai. He's from the Tata Group, and he's a very smart young man, and he has developed a portfolio himself, and he is chartering almost one ship a week to trade on the coast, which means there is some gap. There is a gap in our trade where a foreign operator, so to say, from Dubai is serving the market. So what do we do? Is there something wrong with our system? As I said, I don't intend to trouble anybody or question anybody, but it seems from liberalization 30 years ago, if you go by the statistics available and the graph I was showing and what Mr. Hazara was saying, we are going downhill, pretty steep, pretty steep. Look at that curve if you want, which I downloaded, uploaded to share. It shows that we are literally in the wrong business. 6.3 was the worst. Fortunately, Captain Pinto, Seven Islands bought some tankers, so we are up to some 7 point something. That's the Indian trade share in our export imports. That is unpardonable, whatever be the policy. And if the news of liberalization is this, it is terrible. Not because we are seamen, because we are active citizens. We are scared. We are worried about India's security as far as energy and food is concerned. That's the main talk here. The good news is we have hit 100 plus. As it so happens in cricket, the late spectators come before the batsman gets the 100. So just about 100 participating. So now let me give it to Patnaik if he's there. Then we also have Captain Rajgopal. Raj, you can take from Patnaik. He has got some inputs to how this reserve fleet will have to work. For example, if under Rule B, there is a currency transfer problem through New York, then everything will stop. Even if you charter foreign ships, we cannot remit higher. It's a practical problem. Those of you in shipping would know. So there are issues related with this. So Kamal, can you give it to Patnaik? If it's not there, Rajgopal. Then back to me.
Captain Pullett, good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for a nice introduction. So I'm no more a young lad now, crossed 50. So very much Indian at heart, although doing business from Dubai. So I am not really sure what the question was, but then I think what you wanted to ask is that why we have such a huge presence on the Indian coast as ISL Dubai. I think Mr. Hajra is there. He has been on a board, so he knows what we do. Well, it is a pure commercial arrangement and nothing to do with why we do and how we do it. It's just that it's a Tata Group company based out of Dubai and we're doing a lot of coastal business. But yes, I mean, the fact that we're doing more business is that there is a depleting Indian flag fleet, no doubt about it. And we are mostly competing with Indian flag when it comes to it. But the fact that we are doing so much business, it only says that Government of India is so open to foreign operators operating on the Indian coast. And ultimately, commerce is what decides about the flow of goods from one point to another point. So if you can match the rate and you're competitive and there are no competing vessels, then you do business. So that is why we have so much presence. And I think you also wanted to address a little bit on the problems that we face with respect to clearances from DG shipping and all that. Yes, I mean, there are issues with respect to customs and DG shipping, but they're getting better, I must say, over the years. There was a time when DG shipping approval, INSA approval could take almost 5 working days, but it has come down to 2 working days, which is a very, very positive development. And we still have problems with customs with respect to bunker duty calculation and things like that, settlements. So I'm sure they will smoothen out over a period of time. But yes, so these are my few, but thank you again for some insightful discussion, which I heard earlier. I think Mr. Hajra touched upon very important point about why we require Indian flag and Indian fleet for energy security, for sustainability, for economic development, for maritime security. But we cannot confuse between commerce and defense. They're two different subjects, I think. And as you know, also Indian seafarers, they're not really geared up. They do not know how to fight war. So to expect out of Indian seafaring community to fight war is also asking too much. So I think while the merchant fleet needs to grow up, the Indian flag vessels, definitely there is a need. Also, the defense has to be strengthened as well. So you have a good balance between defense and commercial ships. So that's my take on what to start with. If any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thanks, Saumen. Actually, like I said, we must congratulate him because I know the commercial part of it. He went there as an individual, even though it's very well supported by Tatas, but he developed that portfolio very well. We must be proud of it. But at the same time, what I'm pointing out is, if somebody sitting there is chartering a ship a week, there is big demand. Why are Indian owners not investing? What is wrong with our community? What is INSA watching? I think time has come to forget 406 license. 406 license has become a headache. Ask him every week he has to get before lifting subjects on a Friday evening. It's not possible. It adds to cost. So we, the citizens, are the losers. I think there's something very clear. 406 is dead. We don't want 306 in the next bill. Okay, Rajgopal, are you there for your inputs on that reserve fleet operational issues? Kamal, can you facilitate him?
Yes, yeah, good morning and thank you, Captain Pullett. So, yes, I heard your comments on the various presentations that has happened so far. While, of course, when we are on the subject of the commercial shipping and to really continue with the trading, especially in a situation where there's an embargo. So we have seen that with Iran, and while we were wanting to buy oil, it was not possible to pay them in dollar terms, and we did try using Indian rupee equivalent payments, but that was also short-lived. So we required to look at options and to keep our trade going. The way the situation in the world is we are splintering more and more further into various blocks, and therefore there could be situations where a few countries may try to impose sanction on the others, and that would create problems, and and the trade per se will suffer. Today, more important than ever before, a lot of countries are looking at options of digital payment, such as your cryptocurrencies. And China is already well advanced in bringing their own cryptocurrencies. And so is US, and some of the private players are into it, like PayPal and so many others. So we all know about Bitcoin and the other existing cryptocurrencies, about 10 of them, largely being today used. So we need definitely a sovereign backed cryptocurrency for India too, because in situations like these, if the trade were to be coming to a stop because we are unable to make payment, so where do we go? So we definitely require to look at that. And in that context, in fact, the gift city in Ahmedabad was basically, the design was to have that city which is outside the Indian law, so that you are able to actually be a international facility which could do a lot of such transactions. And that has really not fully fructified, though there are lots of steps taken. And while we are at it, the Colombo plan of extending the port city, which the Chinese have already backed that project, and that's a 2 billion project, where that city is going to be outside the Sri Lankan law, basically in order to cater to such situations. Now, it is right there at the footstep of India. So whom are they really looking at? If India does not move having its own, then the Indian private businesses will have no other option but to go to such facilities which are close by. And these are the kind of businesses that we are offering to our immediate neighbors on a platter without really trying to get anything out of it. So earlier too, Jagmeet mentioned about a second flag, which is very welcome. In fact, our laws should be so framed that in emergencies we should be able to in a jiffy, able to reflag into the other flags, so that we are able to continue with the trade. So if we do not have such policies in place in good times, so when we have an emergency in hand, we will not be able to immediately, because in a country like India, where there is democracy, of course, people will immediately go to Supreme Court, take a stay. Because if the laws are not in place, it is not possible to do trading. Everything will come to a standstill. So we need to have the alternates already laid out, and so that our trade continues and we are able to continue with having the right backups, especially in times like, say, this pandemic, for example. And then there are several more such things that we will probably go through in the next decade or so, because that is how the world is moving. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Raj. We have 10 minutes left for 90 minutes. So I think panel discussion is good enough. My only request is, can we form a trio, a team of Commodore Watson, Mr. Azara, and probably Captain Vivekanand or Shankar or myself? I'm putting 3, choice of 1 from the 3, so that we make a recommendation statement to the authorities, to the government, within the next 1 week. Okay, let me leave that thought with you, because we have question answers as well as a very short presentation by K.N. Ramesh. We want to touch upon the coastal as well as inland waterways. Questions Kamal will choose, but 2-3 questions I remember. Let me finish it so that we save time. One is, yes, the Merchant Navy officers do get a short defense course when we do our COC, at least in India. unless you are doing foreign COC and trying to sail on Indian ships. So we do get interaction with the Navy, little get brainwashed, and we do carry the Navy papers on Indian ships. Those who have sailed know that. So it's not that the merchant Navy as second line of defense knows nothing about Coast Guard and Navy. That's something we have to do when emergency breaks out. So there's a lot of micro details to be filled in. Let's leave that. So I suppose Ken Ramesh is there. Kamal, can you invite Ken Ramesh? He is going to summarize as well. So I'm closing the panel discussion as it is, unless Hazara or Commodore Watson wants to say something. Sir, anything from your side?
I mean, I know that time constraint. All that I would say that we must look at India in the context of countries like USA, China, to some extent maybe Japan, South Korea. There is no point in comparing our country, our economy to anyone else. And if we look at these countries, we will find that in one way or the other, China, of course, is well known. Japan, South Korea has built up their own, control tonnage to a large extent. And USA through the Jones Act, in any case, have definitely, a lot of control on that tonnage. So we must look at these countries and see how vulnerable we are vis-a-vis most of the countries in the world. And second thing, there was a question that why aren't Indian ship owners investing when there is so much of scope, which is corroborated by the fact that Showmo can charter one ship per week. We have talked about this for ages, about the so-called, it was touched here also about when talking of the second registry, about the so-called level playing field. Unfortunately, Indian ship owners are greatly constrained, both primarily by the fiscal as well as to some extent by the commercial regime prevailing here, which makes it very, very difficult for us to compete on equal grounds. Because as we have been saying, our taxation is 9-10%, whereas most of the fleet across the world, they pay either nothing or 0.5% and things like that. So that's all. I don't want to linger because there is no time, I am aware of.
Thank you, sir. Does Commodore Watson want to add something?
Yeah, I would like to just make some brief comments. I totally agree with Mr. Hazara on his appeal for increasing our tonnage. Now, this is obviously linked to the economy that we have, which is only about 2.83 trillion. We were hoping that it will touch 5 trillion, and we are still 1/5 that of China. China is already at 15 and moving ahead after the COVID. So unless we are in a position to add to our total comprehensive national power in terms of economy, in terms of tonnage, in terms of seafarers, luckily the seafarers is one area where we are still okay. So we will not be able to move forward. So we'll have to work on many levels to see that our security, not just energy security or conventional security, all security in a holistic way is managed. There was one or two questions about China. So it's very clear that geographically, I brought out in my presentation to say that we are blessed with geography. In terms of having Andaman Nicobar, which is 740 nautical miles from Chennai, and we have Lakshadweep Minikal, which is southwest of India. So we need to cultivate this and ensure that there is the dependence for our warships, our Coast Guard ships, in terms of being supported, is brought down to the minimum. Here is where the figures that I quoted are authentic. So the strategic petroleum reserve we are talking about, apparently something which is giving you a 87-day availability. With the United Nations Security Council, which will intervene to stop any war within first 10-15 days, the Indian Army has developed Cold War doctrine. So, but we could not bank on this. Another important point that came out was on digital payments. If you do not have the capacity to transact, how will you pay the people? Which is where the importance of developing your own ability to fight war on your own becomes extremely important. I thought I'll flag some of these issues because these are important, but don't worry too much about China in terms of how it's come to Sri Lanka. Somebody specifically quoted 290 kilometers from Kanyakumari. If it is 290 kilometers from Kanyakumari, it's within the fighting range of the Navy, the Army, the Air Force. So don't worry about it. We'll neutralize them should it come to that. So don't worry about it too much. But yes, we should be on guard and ensure that his weaknesses are addressed. His major weakness is passing through the states of Malacca. we can neutralize him there. That's where we should be, concentrating in all our efforts in shoring up our capability in Andaman Nicobar. So you saw that there's a big photograph that was there day before yesterday of INS Chakra returning to Vladivostok through the Straits of Malacca. So every vessel that goes through Straits of Malacca will be monitored. So if you know who's coming in, who's going out, of course, there are issues of how are you going to manage differently flagged ship. So which is why the Maritime Domain Awareness program that is being controlled from Navy, from Gurgaon, has a major role in, separating the chaff from the grain. So we need to invest on not only separating the chaff from the grain, but then what to do with the chaff. So there are many questions. I know we do not want to run into the times of others, but these are some important issues that must be followed up. But thank you. I think some wonderful points have been made by all the panelists and also external speakers, who have showed us what our vulnerabilities are there, and therefore how we need to address them. So the challenge for this panel and for others is to come out with the way ahead options on how we need to address them and be more capable of taking on a future contingency. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So we must form a team. As I said, ideally, Mr. Hajara, Commodore Watson, and one from us, probably Captain Vivekanand. Okay, I suppose Ken Ramesh is there. Ramesh, please.
Yeah, very much here. And Commodore Watson, on a very lighter note, correct, India is blessed with a beautiful geography, but we are cursed with our capricious decision making by the men who matter out there. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Now let me get into the coastal shipping. Well, I've in the last 5 years, I've moved 2 million tons per annum of coal on the coast. And I can tell you the amount of pains that I've gone through with the administration in chartering the vessels has been even more than a labor pain. It's been, it's tremendous. I mean, to handle 2 million tons on the coast per annum, which is almost like 2 vessels a week, and dealing with the kind of, sanctimonious rules and regulations, outdated rules and regulations that we have, has been quite a challenge. And I'd like to highlight it. Without taking too much of time, I'll just spend 5 minutes on this and then wrap up and summarize what the previous speaker spoke. Well, to have a good coastal shipping running, fueling the system of Indian economy, we need to have a great deal of improvements on our fiscal regime. Especially, let's start with the duty on bunkers. Now, at the end of the day, the end user is going to pay for whatever we move, and he needs a cost-effective solution. Now, if he needs a cost-effective solution, the start point would be the price of bunker prices for vessels to run on the coast. Second, we have to have a comprehensive coastal shipping policy. We are all over the place. I mean, the feeder vessels have a different set of rules. Bulk carriers have a different set of rules. Tankers are in their own league. I mean, everybody is in different directions. It's a cosmic chaos. Unfortunately, these things, they have to be looked at a very large perspective, from a very large perspective. And a uniform policy has to be brought about, which is the need of the hour immediately. Now, India has got, about over 1 lakh miles of land roadways, of which only 1.7% is highways. So the only way you can move commodities is to ease the road traffic, ease the traffic on the highways, is to move commodities on the coast. And especially like what Commodore Vasan said, when we are blessed with such a beautiful geography, I think we are falling short somewhere on that. I mean, in the recent past, we were the first ones to start a liner ro-ro shipping trade across the Indian peninsula. We would move cars from the East Coast to West Coast and bring back cars from the West Coast to East Coast. I mean, we ran it for 7 months. And I'll just finish off with this little example of what we had to face. And that would tell a larger story. Now, when we started this ro-ro business, there was a policy in the Ministry of Shipping which said that they would pay 3,000 rupees for every car that is lifted off the road and moved by ship. it was published in the Ministry of Shipping, policy in the website. And we started this ro-ro service thinking that, this is something that's going to be handed over to us. And we moved substantial amount of cars from the East Coast, the Fords of the world, the Hyundais, the Renault Nissans, and brought back from the other side, Tatas and, Hyundai's got another car manufacturing unit on the West Coast. And sorry, we brought back, now when we moved these cars from East Coast, a simple thing like customs has no business in coastal shipping. Customs initially wanted us to file a domestic export general manifest. Now what that is, I don't know. If someone could explain to me later, I'd be very grateful. Later we explained to them and they saw sense and they said, okay, it's probably not required. But we used to file a shipping bill. On the other side, when we went to West Coast, the Kandla Customs used to insist on a coastal shipping bill and a coastal export general manifest for cars that are being exported from there. We are not exporting any cars. We're just moving the cars around the peninsula. But unfortunately, these are the kind of policies that we are faced with. On the East Coast, the same customs, same rules and regulations all over India, but interpreted differently in different places. How does a coastal shipping carrier deal with all of this? Needless to say, the kind of problems that you go through with the DG in getting it's improved. Like Captain Patnaik said, it's improved. Now to get an approval, it takes about 2 days, but it should be a lot shorter in this digital world, in this new age where everything is done on a jiffy with a press of a button. It should be almost instantaneous. Well, that's a discussion for another time. But these are the kind of issues that we are faced with, and at the end of it, when we ran this coastal ro-ro business, the shipping ministry raised their arms and they said, we placed this in front of the ministry, the finance ministry, and finance ministry refused to give any dolouts. So the 3,000 rupees was lost. And as a result, we did the entire shipping of cars from east to west and west to east coast, introducing a new age service. A very new age service on the ro-ro shipping. I mean, it was rendered fruitless. I mean, it just went down the drain. We couldn't create a legacy there. And I'm not too sure if ro-ro shipping can ever happen on the coast going forward. Well, this is a little snippet I wanted to say of what happens on the Indian coast. Well, I mean, if Captain Pullet, if it's all right, can I summarize all the speakers? Otherwise, we could go on and on with what's happening in the Indian coastal shipping.
I think we missed the summary. I think most of us have heard they're going to make a physical report and circulate it. Kamal's team will do that. Hard copy. We are already 90 minutes, so let's skip.
Okay, fine.
Okay, Kamal, if the questions are not too many and we can skip the question answer also or club it in the end because the next session is very important. Kamal, I leave it to you.
Yes, thanks, Uri. Fortunately, most of the questions have gotten answered in this discussion we had now. So there's only one question I think will require Jagmeet to answer this one, please. Jagmeet, this is a question for you from Captain Ajay Achutan. What he wants to know is that in the case of the second register that you're proposing, how will we ensure that political and bureaucratic interference will not make the alternative, the red ensign, redundant? Second is just not started, or we lose quality control. Jagmeet, all yours.
Well, that's a big story. Actually, let's get over the bureaucratic problems, like we said about customs and subsidy, for example. In fact, there is subsidy to shipyards, if you want to know, but that has never been paid. So 2 of my friends running shipyards are up in arms, or they put the arms down and surrendered also. In other words, they closed the yard. So let's not get too deep into those issues. That comes once these things get established. So for want of time, let's switch to the next topic. If others don't mind, you can always ask me personally questions or mail it to me. We will answer in writing if necessary, just to save time. Thank you very much. So we are switching to the next topic. Today is World Environment Day. in case you forgot. And somebody talked about a practice drill about preparation for emergency response. I think there is nothing to beat it, but before the monsoon. Monsoon hit Kerala coast south yesterday. So I think we'll bring in Donny and Kapil Gupta. If they want to have a practice session, this is the time before monsoon really hits Bombay, before June 7th, the normal date. So let me start the second session properly. I hope some may have joined additionally, or some may want to leave, but we are still very close to 100. Thank you for everyone for listening to us. The second topic is more important because when a disaster happens, if we are not ready, there is no
Recording in progress.
picking up the whistle and blowing. And we have administrative problems as well. It must be streamlined. There must be a single authority. We are trying to recommend that through National Shipping Board. Mrs. Malini Shankar will chair the moderator session, panel discussion towards the end. I hope she has joined. So we in MEC came up with a word called IMERA. If nothing else, it stands for Indian Maritime Emergency Response Authority. The last word obviously comes from bureaucratic language, authority. So we need something like that, like we have SOSREP in UK, one person, not a committee, who can drive, and it should be synchronized with National Disaster Management Plan. We cannot be playing tug of war. We must have powers properly distributed, resources, manpower, funds, everything. Because this country, if your national highway gets blocked, waterways get blocked with an earthquake or something, you can only approach from the coast. So the Navy and Coast Guard is important. The Air Force is important for dropping food and medicines and airlifting and things like that. So we must work closely with National Disaster Management Plan. Unfortunately, we don't have time to involve them here. So we are sticking with Navy and Coast Guard. So I have to hand over after that to Venkat. Venkat, if you're ready, let's get on with it.
Good morning, gentlemen. Kirtan, just show that only one slide I sent you. Seaward emergency and pollution control response.
The video can switch to Venkat, please. Shall I stop mine?
Yeah, I myself have shared it here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are a republic and a democratic society, and we are governed our day-to-day life by set of laws which we have given it unto ourselves. So there is a law linking every activity that takes place in our sphere of activities. So the government is duty bound to adhere to the laws created by the parliament, that is the lawmakers. So to prevent any emergency or pollution onto our country, we have a national disaster management setup, which consists of various ministries except shipping. It is unfortunate that they have not thought about it or considered that some kind of a mishap or some kind of a pollution related costs can come from the seaward side onto the land. The Merchant Shipping Act mostly licenses all the assets that operate in the offshore industry. Our offshore industry activity started from the year 1962, gradually developing. From 70 onwards, we have a lot of rules and regulations coming into place, but everything was standalone, independent operating rules. When ONGC has some emergency control measures, that is with respect to a particular unit, and they are not thinking about the pollution or a blowout can reach the shores of India, like it can go to Gujarat or it can come to Maharashtra and all along the coast, or on the east coast it can come to Andhra Pradesh and go anywhere, including Andaman, Nicobar, it can travel. There is no plan on the boards of law. There is nothing connecting these kind of incidents to the National Disaster Management Plan. Even in the 2019, they omitted anything coming from the seaward side. And the Ministry of Shipping, which controls most of the assets there by way of licensing, inspection, monitoring, is totally not there in the picture. But these plans have been going on since 2016. I do not know why people have not looked at it and did not want to get the Ministry of Shipping involved and be in the advisory level, or at least in the guidance level. They could have been involved in that. So there is no plan. And the NDMA does not have any plan for any kind of emergency out at sea, like what happened a couple of weeks ago in one of those production platforms while construction. There is no plan at all in the NDMA schemes. And also the ONGC also did not have any plan. And if you see disaster management plan, what we see in the public domain of Coast Guard, it's only about how to control oil spills. And whether they have procedures, how to do it is there. Maybe they may have been document which is not available for us in the public domain to analyze and see to or offer comments or offer some extra advice. It is not there. So we need somebody who has got a overall picture or an overall authority with responsibility to tackle all the ministries together in case of an emergency that were to happen in the offshore fields of India, either on the east coast or on the west coast. This particular person, he should not have only a paper authority like DG Shipping. DG Shipping can give only issue orders because it has to be executed by either by another ship owner or by some other authority. If you see the DG Shipping has got powers to invoke in kind of emergencies as per the Merchant Shipping Act 356L or 411, but it has to be passed on to somebody. So the offshore emergency coordinator must be best with the Navy and the Coast Guard, who have their asset, and they have got manpower standing 24/7, and they are the ones who went for the rescue of these people of P305. So an on-scene commander should be with these people who are trained to perform such kind of jobs in very tiring and difficult situations, and are also volunteering to do this, because these people are the front line of defense. They will not hesitate to go and save anybody or protect any assets. So they must be equipped with a proper kind of vessels and equipments, and further training how to contain this kind of situation like a blowout, like it happened in the Deepwater Horizon. It can happen in our coast also. We should be prepared for all these things. So with this, we will invite the Coast Guard Commandant. He is a serving officer. He has had hands-on experience. He has attended international arbitrations. He is a 1990 batch Indian Coast Guard officer, specialized in navigation and direction from the Indian Navy. He is also a specialist in search and rescue courses from Singapore and IMO Level 3 oil response for OSRL, having diploma in Masters in Maritime Affairs from World Maritime University. He is also an LLB from Delhi University. He has commanded 4 classes of Indian Coast Guard ships and responded to 2 oil spills and 2 major firefighting operations at sea, and coordinated more than 12 oil spills. Vast experience in operational matters. I invite IG Donny Michael to open the session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'll try to share my screen. It's not playing that much. So can someone share my slides, please?
Yeah, I will share.
For the slides come on, the session is on focusing on Indian Maritime Emergency Response Authority. It's a good acronym. I'm speaking on behalf of the Coast Guard in my personal capacity. I'm not representing the views of the Indian Coast Guard. In best, I can say I'm representing Indian Coast Guard as amicus curiae. That is it. What is this association is been known for. Right, first slide. Okay, we have been witnessing the container ships fires in the last particularly last 15 years.
Because all the commodity
Venkat, can you mute, please?
IG Dhoni, your mic is off. You tell me which slide you want. Second, third. Yeah.
Yeah, can I go? Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, just go to the previous slide, the first slide. Yes, thank you. Just a brief introduction on the container ship problems. Mostly it's on, the fire problems arose the past 15 years. And the Indian Coast Guard has responded more than 15 ship fires by firefighting through the Coast Guard ships. It's actually not meant to fight, fire professionally, unlike the DP ships do, but the capability we have, which is also limited, we're trying our best to fight the fire, at least as an emergency response. The next slide. These are the pictures of the recently undertaken firefighting operations. The top right is the Pearl Express. The bottom left is the the famous empty star diamond, and the right also is the empty star diamond. You can see that the ship 201 is a famous Samudra Prairie. It's a pollution control vessel. It is capable of fighting fire. It has a limited DP capability. So it has a little bit a capability to fight the fire, unlike the other professional OSVs. Next slide, please. On the left topmost corner, again, the pollution control vessel is fighting the fire. The name of the ship is MV Amsterdam Bridge. This ship was, living. I want to add some story so that it will have the attention of everybody. It was in the year 2012, in August or September. The ship was leaving Mumbai port, and it was a Singapore ship flagged in Panama, and it had an explosion while it was leaving the Mumbai harbor. It had pilot on board. The pilot disembarked immediately and directed the ship to go and anchor and evacuate the personnel. Because the explosion was so great, it was heard even up to 10 kilometers from the port premises. I was inside the harbor. We sailed immediately. That time I had no experience. I was commanding the ship 201. I had no experience. I can go very close and fight the fire. It took a while to get close to it, and we remained there for more than 72 hours, and we were able to bring down the fire. Now I want to add additional information. It's not only the fire which is a problem here. After the fighting fire, the ship was anchored just on the channel. The channel was about 12 meters, and the ship has a draft of 10 meters. Post fighting the fire, the ship had a draft increased to 11.5 meters. Now what will happen? After it was estimated, after 3 or 4 days, the tide in Mumbai is going to be minus 1.5 meters. That means at a particular point of time with the same draft, if it's not reduced by pumping out, it's going to get ground. And this vessel had almost 900 tons of heavy fuel oil. That will be a bigger headache than what has happened right now. So we told the port to take charge of it. The port said, okay, Coast Guard, the salvors have come. You just coordinate with the salvors. The salvors, after embarking the ship, they found almost all the tanks were full. The holes were full. They asked for specific permission from the Coast Guard to pump out the water. I was amazed. I said, just pump out. They were very particular. No, please give us in writing. Otherwise we are not going to do anything. And it was a catch-22 situation. If I give the approval, and there may be consequences later. But if I don't do, within 2 days, the ship will get aground. Then later I communicated with my headquarters and found out, the salvors were very specific in asking, because the water is already contaminated. When they pump out this water outside the ship, they need specific permission from environmental authority. Now, since it's within the port premises, within the territorial waters, the land acts apply. And accordingly, the environment department of the Maharashtra government, they came inside. They said, you can't pump out the water, it has to be pumped out in some barges, and thereafterwards to be, treated, and then only they'll give the permission. A lot of challenges were there. We coordinated. We had our ship had some capacity to take in some water, and we coordinated very well. Later, our ship's company also was involved because it had an explosion. The explosive department of the government of Maharashtra was also got involved. The sections of IPC also was put on the ship. The captain was a Ukrainian. Now, first he used to be aggressive against the Coast Guard, what all actions were taken, because we forced him to act on the directions given by the Coast Guard. Later, that ship remained there for more than 4 months because there were certain sections, Explosive Act, the Environment Act, the Water Act, and so many other acts were put against the ship, and took a while for the ship to get out of Mumbai. This I'm saying because everybody will say it's very easy to just go and fight the fire and come out, but there are a lot of other issues also involved in firefighting. On the right, again, we are fighting the fire, which is a small comfort in the year 2013, in the middle of Arabian Sea. The previous slide only, sir. Yes, the right side, top corner. Again, I'm fighting the fire. Even though there were 4 or 5 ships, which is standby to fight the fire, they didn't go in, particularly because of the reason, it was carrying a lot of dangerous cargo. But, we are all trained in a particular way, we bash on regardless, then anything happens, we'll take care of it later. And the same ship, when approached from astern, it was under tow. And I'm aware, after this incident, we were able to rescue a person who just snapped his hand, and we were able to bring him back safely to the port in the rough sea conditions, which occurred in July 2013. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slides. Now, having looked into the issues of the firefighting, now another incident, type of incidents which Coast Guard response is the oil spill. There was some debate earlier, and also Captain Venkat also touched upon whether we have a system in place to respond to oil spills in India. The Indian Coast Guard is recent, so it's just finished 44 in service. Before that, the oil spill issues were looked after by the DG Shipping as a central coordinating authority. In the year 1986, the central coordinating authority was passed on to Indian Coast Guard. And in 1992, we had a committee of secretaries approving our draft National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, Disaster Contingency Plan. And the first edition was promulgated in 1996. Thereafterwards, it had an updated version, the latest edition being the 2015. If we look into this book, we come to understand, not a single organization is fully equipped to, tackle these kind of incidents. So the government of India, rightly so, always, tries to tackle all these emergencies through a committee of, involving various ministries and organizations. Accordingly, the Northeast, if you ever happen to open to it, it has, a support system of 27 different agencies, including the major player being the Indian Navy and the DG Shipping, which can call for additional ships under 356L. It was invoked in several cases. And also the powers were given to the Indian Coast Guard under 356J, G, and K for giving notice to the polluter, and thereafter, if he fails to do any action, we will, respond to that oil spill, and thereafter seek a claim from the polluter. These are some of the pictures, way back in 2005 to 2015. Recently, we didn't have major oil spills except for Don Kanchipuram off Chennai. That was in the year 2016 and 17. And thereafter, whatever the oil spills that has occurred are all minor in nature. It's less than 10 or 15 tons, which occurs outside the coast. We generally tackle by application of oil spill dispersants. If it comes near the coast, we have some, next slide, please. We have some, national pollution response capability, which involves, more than 20 kilometers of boom. We have ships and aircrafts equipped with locating the oil spills even during night. And we have skimmers, we have oil applicators, we have, oil barges, which can roughly, I can say, it can tackle up to a spill of, say, 2,000 to 5,000 tons at sea. And under this North GCP, as I said earlier, it has to be tackled through a coordination of efforts from all the different agencies. So what we did, having read the convention, which applies for the oil spills, that is the OPRC, Oil Preparedness, Response and Cooperation 1990 IMO Convention, which the India is party, we found the first major roadblock is, as per the convention, we have to nominate as one singular agency as a central, the competent national authority. And so far, it has not been established under any legislation. However, through a governmental committee, this is what I call a soft law track. Indian Coast Guard has been provided various soft law kind of powers, but we're not hard law through any legislation. So we actually coordinate, oil spill response capability of the ports, of the major ports and the minor ports. We go for inspection. We keep telling them to at least equip themselves to have oil spill response equipments to fight up to a tier 1 spill, that is up to 700 tons. And most of the major ports have acquired it, but not up to the level of 700 tons, but at least to respond to immediate oil spills that occur in that jurisdiction. An interesting development has taken place last year. The ports have come together. They understood, stockpiling of equipment for unknown oil spill is a drain the resource, and also earmark port personnel for that. So they have formed a committee to identify a suitable oil response service provider. So that they identified in 6 places. This service provider will be having a stockpile to respond to more than 10,000 tons to any ports under duress, and for which they will be paid remuneration by collecting fee from the visiting ships or through other arrangements. Through this, the ports will look after all these oil spill disasters within the port limits, and the Coast Guard is always there, because none of the oil spill which occurred in port area remains within that area. It travels into the sea and to the shore areas. And under the North GCP, which also has a subdivision of regional oil spill disaster contingency plan and the district oil spill disaster contingency plan, through which arrangements have been identified even up to the local district level, wherein we can pull in resources from the various stakeholders and tackle the spill. Remember, what all services is doing is not free, because always there is an insurer, there's a P&I club. Most of the cases are stepped in and assisted in, making the reimbursements, and also, bringing a lot of other response equipment and resources from outside to tackle any oil spills. But I must admit, but we don't have, a person in authority to tackle oil spills, under any legislation. So we always depend upon, the support system. Now, Coast Guard, having understood, this high risk activity that is taking place, we have in our inventory, next slide. a specialized Samudra Prairie class oil pollution control vessel. We have right now 3 in numbers. One is already, standby at Colombo to respond to oil spills that may emanate from sinking of MV Pearl Express. 2 are there standby, at one in West Coast and one in East Coast. So this has limited capacity, can respond to various type of oils, and you can also, separate the oil, and then thereafter they can take the collected oil to transport it to another refinery or sometime later. Next slide, please. For your information, we are also, placed order for 2 additional pollution controls, which is most advanced. It's a next generation pollution control vessel. It's an inbuilt faster and cleaner and smarter recovery system where you don't have to have a side sweeping arms. It comes automatically, and it can actually, respond to more than 1,000 tons in a day. This is what we are looking forward, and it's might take 2 to 3 years to come into commissioning. Now, I'll come to the issues in hand. Next slide, please. So the key points in the marine disaster management are, first, we have to understand what are the vulnerabilities and the challenges. The cyclone doesn't come. During around these months, if we take that, the past histories, in the West Coast, around 2 to 3 cyclones, on the East Coast, 3 to 4 cyclones occur. We have to be ready to face those challenges. We know our coast, apart from the cyclone, we have the monsoons, hitting from June to September in the West Coast, and from November to January in the East Coast, for which, the ships, and the Coast Guard ships and the naval ships, we have a monsoon plan, and we sail ships accordingly. So I think, the vessels which are involved in, especially in offshore activities, we have to have a, monsoon plans or cyclone avoidance plans or some contingency plans. And I want to mention here, just like NOS GCP, I think Admiral Kapil Gupta sir will touch upon it. Navy has a robust plan established with ONGC to, foresee what all kind of emergencies that might arise from the offshore development area platforms, and to tackle those. And my salutes goes to them, because they tackled very nicely as per the plan during the passage of the cyclone Taukte, and they have done a wonderful job, because and we also joined them to rescue more than 120 survivors. Now, coming to the legislation and regulations of enforcement, we have firstly the Merchant Shipping Act, which actually gives for maritime safety, maritime security, and environment protection. For the maritime safety and environment protection for the ships, we undertake through flag state implementation program, and also for the foreign ships through port state controls. Unfortunately, Coast Guard is not involved in any inspections of the foreign vessels or the Indian vessels also, regarding the the risks involved in oil spill under the port state control system. So we come into the picture only when the oil spills. That too, the oil reaches the water, then only we are activated as per the act. You also have to understand, there are a lot of fishing boats. Fishing
Hey, IG Donny just lost connection.
Able to hear you. IG Dhoni, we are not able to hear you.
I think he's disconnected, sir.
Maybe we'll come back again. Okay, with this, we will move on. We will ask him to complete it later on because he has got only one last slide. The thank you slide is left out. So when he comes back, we'll talk again. I will request our Vice President, Captain Suresh Amirapu. He's from the last batch of Dufferin, and he's associated with very many port-related direct activities. He's an expert in the port management sector. I request Suresh Amirapu to take over.
Thank you, Venkat. And as you rightly mentioned, I'm also involved in MSc. So I think the very first thing that I would like to do, and this is very spontaneous, is to thank the excellent panel as well as all the participants for joining in here. We have been close to 100 participants. This is very heartwarming to see this kind of response, and also to the speakers themselves. I'm going to, of course, as an organizer, I also have to stick to time. So let me keep this very short. I'm going to talk on an issue which is of, unfortunately, which time and time again hits us in our face, which is the carriage of dangerous cargoes by sea. The whole question of dangerous cargoes stems from the fact that international commerce requires these cargoes to be carried from one place to the other, and they are carried by sea. Of course, some of it carried by air rarely, but mostly by sea, and therefore over a period of time there has been the IMDG, the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code, which has been developed. Broadly, as most of us know, these are classified into various 9 classifications. And the key word, in my opinion, is this 9-letter word called dangerous, because that's what they are. They are very dangerous, and they range from the range of danger changes, explosives, the gases, compressed, liquefied, or dissolved under pressure, flammable liquids, flammable solid, oxidizing substances, toxics and infectious substances, radioactive substances, corrosives, and if all this is not enough, there is a miscellaneous category as well. Now, I think when we look at carriage of these dangerous goods by sea, we have to ask ourselves, and mind you, the different modes of carrying even within by sea. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves is threefold. Is the regulatory regime adequate and is it up to date? Is the documentary regime adequate and is it up to date? And documentary in this case, not merely checklists, but also the record keeping. And finally, these SOPs which are in place, are they actually carried out? You know, and eventually, are there independent auditors who are auditing this, both in form of a scheduled exercise as well as in the form of a random and surprise checks? Now, due to limitation of time, let me focus on the fact that in terms of the different types of cargoes which are carried by sea, bulk gases and bulk liquids, you know, both hydrocarbons such as natural gas, LNG, LPG, as well as the whole range of petroleum products, both crude as well as a whole range of products and bulk chemicals being carried by sea. Here, the situation is I mean, the dangers are no less, but the response to the danger, the adherence of the IMDG code is probably relatively a little better because the number of players are less in number. Industry has taken a great deal of effort, and you see, you know, industry-related codes and regimes in place, such as ISGOT or OICMF, and so on and so forth, which understand clearly the dangers, and they're fairly professional approach towards handling these. To a lesser extent, but equally less, no less laudable, is the efforts of dry bulk cargo as well. And there is a code for that as well, and which is to a large extent adhered. Most of the problems really come from the container mode, and it's not at all surprising that IG Donnie's very first slide talked about container disasters. Now, there is a reason for this. See, containerization itself is the one fundamental change or one fundamental difference in containerized mode as opposed to all the other modes that I mentioned, that in container mode, the unit that carries the cargo has changed. This is no longer the ship. The unit that carries the cargo is the container. Second thing is the intermodability of the container. The standard marine ISO container is adhered clearly to some standards, which makes it universal. It's possible to use first and foremost, it is possible to carry this by different modes, road, rail, and barge, sea, and within sea by various different ships along this route. The second thing is because it's also the most democratic part of shipping, because the maximum number of people are involved in this. And then there is multi-layers, because there are LCLs, there are NVOCCs. So it's not that there are a few standard carriers or a limited number of carriers as you have in the other modes. And very often, because of its sheer intermodability, the actual place where the stuffing of the container takes place could be and is very often some inland dry port. Nobody knows how it is stuffed, whether the packing and lashing and shoring are adequate for the sea passage. A whole host of the people up and down this chain do not know what forces this container is subjected to when it is in a seaway. To my mind, this is the fundamental problem why we have so much of these issues in terms of container shipping. The other point also, which and I personally, from my own experience, both as a port operator and as a seafarer who has worked on container ships, is that I think the design in terms of modern ships now, and these are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The biggest ship is now almost 24,000 TEU capacity. The conventional method of fighting fires simply does not work. I think this idea of just flooding a hole with CO2, as we were taught to do, is no longer viable, for the simple reason that, in my opinion at least, that each of these containers is a unit. It's a box by itself, and it's a sealed box. So it's not going to be easy for the CO2 to find its way in. And that is making these extremely vulnerable for a whole host of reasons. And then, of course, the impact of weather. And each passing year, we are seeing more and more accidents. We're seeing more and more containers being lost overboard due to heavy weather, which again begs the question as to whether the lashing of these containers is adequate for the seaway that there is in. And all these have a cumulative effect on IMDG cargoes if they're carried. And last but not least, because once a container is stuffed in the shipper's location somewhere inland, it could then make a road journey, then a rail journey, then come to the port, then it could be loaded on first the container, the feeder ship, then it goes to a hub port, then it goes along the trunk route on a mainline vessel, and then it gets discharged at the region where it is supposed to. Then it goes into another feeder ship, and then it finally reaches the discharge port where it's offloaded. And all too often, it again makes another journey either by barge or by road or by rail until it reaches the warehouse of the importer where it is finally destuffed. So it's not touched or handled from the time it's stuffed in the shipper's warehouse until it reaches the destination country to the warehouse of the importer. So what then happens is that this is a chain with various links, and again we have found out that it is the weakest link in the chain that causes all the problems here. And it's also a chain which is subjected to human forces, because when this container is on the ship, we all know what kind of forces it is subjected to in the middle of a seaway. More so when there is heavy storm or heavy weather. And of course, today we cannot but talk about containerized dangerous cargoes without talking about the recent Express Pearl case. Now, you see the impact of IMDG here. The cargo in question was nitric acid. And if you just look at the IMDG code, it tells us that this is class 8. It's a corrosive liquid. It's not combustible, but it's a strong oxidizer that enhances the combustion of the substances. So theoretically, when we looked at this cargo, we would think that the danger to this actually comes from the fact that it's corrosive and it's a reactive liquid. But see what it has done. Okay, from this one single box, has caused, or I don't know, number of boxes, I guess, which carried this nitric acid. These boxes collectively have caused one. Number one, of course, there was leakage in which the reactive liquid came out. Number two, there was fire. Number three, there was explosion. Number four was a complete loss to life. Then once the firefighters came on board, then the ship got flooded. The only silver lining I see in this whole episode is the fact that all the crew were evacuated from the ship without loss of life. And then see where it goes up. The ship be abandoned. It's now grounded. It's becoming a major environmental hazard. And there is danger that the debris could reach all the way up to the ecologically sensitive coral banks in the Gulf of Mannar. So things can go very wrong and very fast. And here we have to ask ourselves, where do we stand in India on this? Now, here, and if you come back to the kind of little checklist that I had, what is the regulatory regime? IMDG code is under the MS Act. Okay, now the MS Act, and rather the IMDG code does specify that there will be punishment of violation for those who do not fulfill this. But the fact of the matter is that the actual packing is supposed to be done to the packing of the Indian Institute of Packing. But the fact is that in the actual locations where these are stopped, which will be somewhere inland, people have really no clue. And nor do any local authorities get involved. I don't think the district magistrate really has any clue as to what the MS Act says. I don't mean to disrespect everybody, but that I think that is the reality. I don't think the police also have any idea what the MS Act is. And if you start from there and keep going all the way down, the sheer capability of destruction is very high. And therefore, I think this is something that we need to address, and we need to address it very quickly. Then, of course, unfortunately or fortunately, there is the Indian question of jugaad. The word jugaad is mentioned earlier. To me, jugaad is a big range. I don't think it stops at one place. And jugaad in India can range right from Nayapan, which is innovative and fresh ideas, which is always
Bullet.
But all the way to Chalta Hai. Chalta Hai is what is the bare minimum I need to do, and how can I get away with it? So unless we address that these are the real problems that we are confronted with, I think we can have a serious problem, the issue on our hands. Now, as far as this particular thing, Express Pearl is concerned, the only reference really to India is to be the fact that the shipping line involved claims that they had requested this box to be offloaded one of the Indian ports, and that port refused. But otherwise, there's been a lot of information flowing around. But yesterday, actually, I got a call from someone who's actually seen the manifest, and he confirms to me that the cargo was actually loaded at Jebel Ali and it was meant for Jakarta. And these were all intermediate ports that we were coming in. But nonetheless, it is the wise who learn from the mistakes of others. And therefore, I think that this should be a wake-up call for us in the manner that we are doing these things, and before any other major disaster hits us. I was listening very carefully to Commodore Donny, because here is a gentleman who's actually seen it, who's been there, who's done it, who's actually handled disasters. I don't think we can work with this system, honestly, where you have multiple 27 agencies involved in looking at a disaster, and then once the rectification action has to happen, then you have to take permission from one party as to whether the accumulated water for firefighting can be pumped out or not. Then you have to take from some other department. This simply will not work. And then there's a third guy who's coming and saying whether the Water Act is being violated or not. I don't think that this is the way that we can operate on this. This is a huge wake-up call. I think we need to do something. We need to do something very quickly, and we need to do the correct thing. And in this connection, I think right in front of us is staring the fact that we have to have a SOSREP or an equivalent of SOSREP here in India, and we in MSc call it IMERA, but that is just a name. More important thing is that there has to be an authority who has to be trained, he has to be conscious, he has to have the domain knowledge, and then and only then and all these guys have to come under them. There's a real little fear that I think from what I see, there's a little fear that people think they have to protect their own turf. And who is this guy coming to come out of the blue and tell us what to do and how to do? I think that needs to be addressed. These fears, I find really that 90% of the objections which people have stem from ignorance rather than from cussedness. And if we educate these people, I think we can have a better say. I'm sorry, I know I've spoken a little passionately, and therefore I've probably exceeded a little bit of time. My friend is already calling me on the other phone and telling me to wind down. So with these few words, let me end up. And once again, looking forward eagerly to hear the Navy's point of view from Rear Admiral Kapil. And I have to thank him actually for participating in our program, which he's doing for the first time. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Suresh. The next speaker on the line as per the program is Captain Imam Farhat. He's an experienced solver. A small anecdote with response to your wake-up call about IMDG. Some years ago, as our friend Captain Sagi has narrated to me, we all know there was a LPG carrier which ran aground off Ratnagiri while carrying the LPG to the Phenolax plants. After running aground, you know what happens in the LPG carriers, the cooling systems were running out. There was no way the LPG could be kept cooled under the required cryogenic temperatures. And there was a big time bomb waiting to explode off Ratnagiri. Luckily, it was in our territorial waters, and Captain Sagi invoked Article 356L and also 411 of MS Act. He requested them in first, but they were refusing to give the vessel to evacuate this, reduce the, lighten this vessel and lighten this liquefied gases. And then he used that MS Act very effectively, brought a vessel from Reliance, reduced the draft of the vessel, and the vessel was floated off, and safely it was retrieved from there. It was a big salvage operation done by the DG Shipping without causing any damage to either environment or to the population who were living on the coast. This was the way the MS Act could be used proactively for any disaster which is about to happen, but there is no reference to the Ministry of Shipping or DG Shipping or any of these things in the National Disaster Management Plan. This is a great job done by the DG Shipping at that time. They rose and saved lots of life and environment. Now I invite Imam Farhat. He's a member of AMISI, and his foreman is waking up somewhere in US, Houston. Maybe it is the middle of the night. We thank him. We are proud to say he's a direct cadet from Shipping Corporation of India. And he has been in the maritime industry for the past 46 years. He got his command. He was working for Neptune Orient Lines of Singapore. And also he was a key man. I think probably he's a serial entrepreneur. He set up American Eagle tankers, and he is manning something called Resolve, which is a salvage company. He's the right man. He owns the asset for any salvage industry. Unless you have ideas in your mind, it's not going to work unless somebody gives you the assets and equipment and trained manpower to go there and salvage. Now I will request Imam Farhat what he has to say about the Indian preparedness for emergencies out at sea in our exclusive economic zone and immediate coastal zones. Thank you, Imam.
Thank you, Captain Venkat. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate that I'm getting this opportunity to speak to such esteemed seniors. Of course, Captain Vivekanand, Captain Suresh Amirapu, and so many familiar faces out there. Good to see you all. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I cannot agree more to what Captain Suresh Amirapu said, and I have been trying my best, going from pillar to post in the context of India, to bring some or share some knowledge that I have experienced in my last 20 years, 25 years, from the other side of the ship, that means on the management side or on the organization side, working very closely with United States Coast Guard, or with SOSREP in UK, or with the Australia, New Zealand administration in handling emergencies. I have tabbed with the Ministry of Shipping in India, and I would like to come back to this a little later, but let me go to my slide a little bit. Though I was introduced in the beginning to respond and give my experience on a firefighting experience that I had on Neptune Alexandrite, but that's a very small matter in this context when there are much bigger fish to fry here. And I'm so very happy that I have some very important people here. And if we can take this forward to any level, it'll go a long way. I have spoken a lot about it on different forums in India, and I take this opportunity to speak again. Once again, can I have my slide? Is anybody there having it, or can somebody allow me to share my screen? Then I can start the slide myself.
please, share your slide, your screen. Please share whatever you want and go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going ahead with my slides. And yeah, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to. So the topic that I want to refer to today is place of refuge. It is very important for me to talk about place of refuge because that is very pertinent to what we are talking today, and I hope we can take it to the next level. The unfortunate incident of MV Express Pearl, which had a very short life, delivered on 10th of February 21, came to the end on the 2nd of June, unfortunately. It seems, and I will go straight to the point, it seems that when there was some indication of smoke coming out, the ship was denied entry in the port of Hamad in Qatar, at port of Hazira in India, before coming to Colombo, where they didn't have a choice but to drop the anchor and request for assistance, and where the whole story became bigger, and today the ship is destroyed. It is a pity. The ship though was supposed to be on a feeder fleet from Port Klang to Singapore to Jebel Ali to Hamad Port to Hazira to Colombo and back to Port Klang. It had done 3 voyages. This was the 4th one, and it had a very unfortunate incident. Again, I have marked denied entry. It is a repetition of the incident of MT Prestige. Most of the shippers, all of us, are aware what happened to Prestige when she had a small explosion on the starboard side, and they went to the coast of Spain. They were in a small port in Galicia. They were not allowed to anchor or take care of the emergency. They tried to touch the coast of France and then to Portuguese. All these places, they were denied entry. And in fact, the particular navies, they asked them to leave the coast. Unfortunately, at last, on the 19th of November, she sank about 210 kilometers away from the coast, unfortunately. 60,000 metric tons of heavy fuel oil was sunk. And these are just the 2 incidents just to bring into the limelight. But there are so many other incidents have happened where I'm sure that the whole school of lawyers sitting in our panel here who know what is the importance of place of refuge. I don't want to take the light from Admiral Kapil Gupta's talk, which has to follow, but there is a lot to speak. Of course, ships like Prestige have a class of ABS. They have the insurance, London P&I Club, one of the international group of P&I clubs, respectable ones. And ABS almost went bankrupt, paying for the penalty. And then right on the coast of India. So those happened, these are the 2 incidents. And then right on the coast of India, where I myself was involved. And it was good to hear from IG Donny about the Amsterdam Bridge. We were the emergency response people from Resolve, and we did fight the fire. Navy did a great job, but the ship was stuck for 4 months. There was no reason for that. And once again, thanks to our senior administration who have more papers to fill than the actual job to do. The vessel Janessa had an emergency carrying aircraft fuel near the port of Kandla, and Navy once again fought this fire along with a few port tugs. We were there to stabilize the vessel. The crew was taken off. The ship was discharged. Fortunately, the weather was good, so we could do the STS operation and discharge the vessel. But this particular discharge or any response was a Herculean task to get any permission from the port, the Dayal port, that is Kandla. Again, an unfortunate incident that happened to Nushi Nalini. Everybody is aware of that, what happened in Cochin. I went personally from pillar to post, again, from the chairman of the port to the deputy conservator to the MMD department, which is there in Cochin, and had numerous meetings to allow the vessel to come in for a day. She was carrying naphtha and she had a fire, and the fire was extinguished with the help of the Navy, and yet there was no success. Everybody just talked, but there was no response. So once again, all these are typical incidents for the port of refuge, and being a marina and having gone through the maritime law where the port of refuge is or a place of refuge is of such significance, nobody pays importance to that. And only if we can do that, there will be a huge favor done to the lives on board, to the environment, to the asset. Seeing so many incidents is just a quote from the Prestige stuff, which says that it is now quite clear that if decisive action had been taken at an early stage to move the ship to a more sheltered location, the ship and its cargo would almost certainly have been saved and any pollution would have been minimal. So it's a known fact. So we must address to the port of refuge, place of refuge immediately. And before I end, I am forced to say that as a consequence of any incident like this, in this particular case of Express Pearl, there was no loss of life. There will be cleanup cost, environmental disaster of course, loss of asset, a huge asset, the brand new vessel with the millions dollar worth of cargo on board, all gone. And there will be serious legal consequences and owners and insurance to pay. Everybody's premium will go up and what have you. Before I just close here, I just want to thank Amici for everything what they are doing. In past 6 months, we have sat with Captain Pulat and Captain Venkat and the team, and there was a move of revising the MS Act, of revisiting that. And that happened. There were a lot of people who had worked on it, but I personally had met in the Ministry of Shipping with the Joint Secretary and the Additional Secretary. And I told them, with all the typical experiences of India, having responded to the government of India with the emergencies like the INS Sindhu Rakshak that had an explosion in Bombay, and we went there to pick up that submarine, take out the bodies and give it respectfully to the Navy, to Amsterdam Bridge, to Nushi Nalini, to Janessa, to numerous other incidents, small and big, that we have responded. And with that backing and seeing what is the administration there, it has been repeated so many times here that there is no legislation guiding all this. And no better than having worked very closely since Exxon Valdez in 1989 in Alaska. I've worked very closely with OPA 90, Oil Pollution Act of 1990 in US, and with SOSREP in UK. And most of the advanced countries have either taken one of these options to implement in their country. India has a large coast. We are seeing incidents just in the last couple of months with New Diamond, Express, Pearl, and what have you, and so many others right on our coast. Let us not wait for an Exxon Valdez to happen on the coast of India, for a major disaster to happen, though we have had close calls with MSC Chitra and Nushi Nalini, which finally after 1 year was taken to Goa. And in the bad weather, she ran aground on the rocks right in front of the governor's house. And God help if something would have happened with the friction, with naphtha on board, God knows. All the wise people sitting in this panel know what could be the consequence. I just, at the end of the day, if we could all sit once again, and I don't know whatever happened to the MS Act that was revised, and a lot of feedback was given by Amici, But definitely the procedure that was followed was not right, in spite of me requesting them that please, in order to revise it, let us have a panel of wise professionals sit in a committee, prepare all the things in the industry that's going on and that needs to be corrected, be it commercial, be it manning, be it emergency response, and then go and make it in the legal wording. But it went the other way around. It was awarded to the University of Nalsar, which is a law university, and they picked up the old MS Act and started correcting that. And then came to us to see what can be input. And that was a wrong move. Though we did our best to complement that or give the insight, I will leave that for Captain Pulat to fill in. But the frustration is tremendous and we don't want to lose this team. We still have time to do something. Let us do. I really appreciate this panel. We have very wise people and senior people here, very effective. We need to really join hands and approach the government to ensure that a very fruitful MS revised legislation is adopted and implemented. I fully agree with SOSREP model for India, where there is one leader who has got the knowledge, not anybody, just because an administrative officer. No, you have to have a knowledgeable professional to take the lead, who can take it for at least 2-3 years to start with the training, exercises, drills, and then the implementation. With that, I thank everybody and thank you for your time and for the patience. I pass on to Captain Ishwar Achanta. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. Very kind of you. Let me introduce Ishwar Achanta. He's one of our AMISI members. He's an entrepreneur. He's a sailor. He was at sea for a long time. Then he settled ashore and he's running his own company called Portman. And he's also one of those honorable members of National Shipping Board. He's doing a wonderful job on the waterfront. We welcome Ishwar Achanta. Ishwar, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Venkat. Thank you, everyone, for that promotion as master. I never was, spent a brief while at sea, Venkat. But thanks again. I feel really good to be called captain. I have a very specific and brief point to make today. I've heard IG Donny, I've heard others as well on emergency response. And I'm going to restrict myself to this very short comment. Without going into the Indian Navy and Coast Guard protocols on search and rescue and assistance, and these are extraordinary as they have demonstrated time and again in rescuing us from so many disasters. So for the lack of any other word, perhaps I should say the civilian policy document on search and rescue needs to be beefed up. And I say this from a personal experience recently, when a ship of ours of 14,000 deadweight MPV left Kattupalli port, and just outside the port, maybe about 8-9 nautical miles, she ran into a sandbank and was firmly grounded. So the head owners called us for assistance, and I got onto the blower and I spoke to the nearby ports. And I won't use the word pleasantly, but I was very surprised to learn that none of these port tugs could put out to sea to assist the ship, for the reason that though they were built under the MS Act for ocean class and strength, their manning document prevented them from putting out to sea beyond the port limits. And therefore, they could not respond to even a private contract to go and assist the ship that had been grounded. So then we were told to get in touch with the port, which had the ETV emergency vehicle vessel position there. And then again, we were pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised to be told that unless the vessel put out at the least a pan call, the administration, and we didn't know which administration they were referring to, perhaps DG Shipping in Mumbai, or we had no clue. Only then the administration would consider putting this vessel out to sea to go and assist our vessel. So obviously the head owners had to take a call on it, because everyone here knows the downside of putting out a pan call or an emergency call, the liability regime that is attached to it. And the master then radioed back to us to say that he's going to wait for 12 hours or 2 cycles of the tide to see whether he can use a kedge or whatever it is that he could do to float himself off. And fortunately for us, He floated himself off a day later, and there was no damage to the hull. There was no spill. There was nothing. But this experience brought to light, in my personal opinion, a great loophole in attending to emergencies that need not always be a fire or an oil spill or something as big as this. There could be other emergencies as well that don't need such great response, but definitely need assistance from the ports and from the administration. So I don't know. I've been tracking this, but I don't see the situation having been changed. If it has changed, well and good for all of us who operate smaller ships or who manage smaller ships on our coast. If it hasn't changed, I commend this as an urgent requirement to attend to MSC or any other body that has the wherewithal to take this up with the government of India. So this is something I just thought I would share with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ishwar. I welcome Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta, an experienced veteran from the Indian Navy. He has a long credit. He's from the NDA, and he's in charge of very many interesting activities for the Navy. He set up the Naval Academy, and he's also a team leader for various projects. He's also involved with the salvage operations in India for some time, and having worked with Captain Imam Farhat in the Resolve enterprise, he's the right person to advise us on what is our emergency preparedness for anything relating to sea and our exclusive economic zone, and slightly off the territorial waters of India, what is our preparedness. Welcome, Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta. He's a decorated soldier. He has got a Nausena medal. So over to Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Captain Venkat, and thank you to Captain Pulat and Captain Farhat Imam for this opportunity to speak here. I do not represent the Navy, though I speak in a manner that I feel is the Navy's view. We are very fortunate to be having this discussion in the aftermath of these two cyclones, the one on the west coast, Tute, and the one on the east coast, Yas. 4 maritime incidents, most of which are directly related to what we are discussing. And the emergency response to the accommodation barge P305, OSV Varaprada, and the emergency Singapore registered Express Pearl that happened off Colombo, which has been discussed enough. So rather than drawing from past incidents, these recent developments give us an excellent backdrop for our discussion today. For the sake of referencing, nobody has mentioned all this. You're all mariners, so you all know we have an over 7,500 kilometer coastline, 2.3 million square kilometers of EEZ. And if our claim for the extended EEZ is accepted, it would double our EEZ. We have 300 islands. In the Andaman and Nicobar, we have 36 islands in the Lakshadweep. It really extends our maritime area in a big manner. The Indian Navy and in the Indian Coast Guard are well-equipped maritime services. Both have clear and defined roles. Both are omnipresent within the vast areas of responsibility, sometimes in the extended and adjoining areas as well. Both have a peacetime role and a wartime role. During peacetime, their roles, apart from ensuring security, extends to providing relief during incidents that may occur at sea. Additionally, the Indian Navy also has the role of providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, which is commonly known as HADR, to not only within India, but also to countries which are neighboring us in the Indian Ocean region and beyond. HADR has come about in the Indian context only after the tsunami hit us several years ago. So like many other of our roles, HADR also requires the Navy to be prepared at all times This also means carrying relief material on board. You may be at sea, deployed somewhere, and an emergency occurs somewhere, and you need to provide humanitarian aid in another country. You don't come back to port. You are already embarked with something called BRICS. I'll come to BRICS later, but every ship that leaves its port carries a certain number of bricks, so that in the eventuality of providing HADR assistance anywhere, she can be deployed straight away without having to come to harbor. During the two recent cyclones, one each on the west and east coast, very little damage was caused ashore, because the Met Department gave adequate and enough warning in terms of time and in terms of geographical limits, and the administration ashore could evacuate, could move people away, could protect property, etc. However, at sea that did not happen, and there was major havoc in of the Bombay High. Despite the fact that from the 11th of May, the Indian Met Department had put out a warning, plotting the track of Taute right across the Bombay High. I recall that late 90s, when there used to be cyclones, the Navy and the Coast Guard would be deployed after the cyclone had cleared off to go and rescue people and property. And I remember that when we used to go out to sea, there used to be fishing boats overturned, damaged, bodies strewn all over the sea. Because in those days, we did not have good Met warnings available, and fishermen would never know when a cyclone was developing. However, in this particular case, the Coast Guard did an excellent job by making sure that every fisherman at sea was sent off back to their port, so that there was no loss of life. With such predictability, disasters at sea due to cyclones, etc., should be a thing of the past, but it is not. Accidents will, of course, occur, and these have to be handled as they happen. But accidents are not because of natural calamities. Despite the excellent predictability and warning, we had the P305, Varaprada, GAL contractor, and a few others who either ran aground, sank, or at least pressed the distress button. There were a couple of them in the South Gujarat coast which had to be provided assistance. So every response has a solution, and the solution is based on the incident, the environment as it exists over there. In our waters, the first responder, as everybody is brought out, is generally the Coast Guard and the Navy. If an incident occurs in the port limits, then of course the port is there to react. They may be better placed to respond. In the Iron and the Coast Guard, the first responder, they are the first responders because they are deployed at sea at all times. It's their job to be at sea, and they are there at sea. They can rush to that spot and react to the incident. The arrival of an aircraft on scene gives a great relief. Our aircraft arrives always earlier, and it can give a great sense of relief to the crew that they've been spotted. They know what is happening. The people ashore, the DG Shipping, Ministry, etc., all the authorities, the multifarious authorities in India who control all these activities, can be given a realistic picture of what the situation is at sea. In the recent case, vessel that sank or ran aground, the Navy, followed by the Coast Guard, were the first responders. Regrettably, nearly 100 lives were lost, but on the positive side, more than 500 were rescued. And when I finish and what I propose as a solution to our problem, I would like that these 86 to 90 people whose lives have been lost during the cyclone Taute, their loss of life should not go in vain. In every country, countries have reacted to incidents. We have not, unfortunately, but it is now time that let the lives of these people shake us up to do something about the system that exists. While the Coast Guard and ships are partially equipped to respond to fires, oil spills, etc., as was brought out by IG Donnie Michael, Indian naval ships can provide better rescue facilities and they have better medical facilities on board. The ships, as also the aircraft on scene, can provide better perspective to the people ashore to know what is happening. Many decades ago, there was an incident in the Bombay High. It was, I think, in the early 80s, when one of the oil rigs caught fire. There was a blowout, Sagar Vikas or Sagar Ratna. And we were there at sea for nearly 4 days. We had no capability. Indian Navy was there, but we had no capability to help them. There were 2 offshore support vessels which were spewing water over the fire, but nothing substantial was happening. Finally, a gentleman called Henry Red Adair, he was known as Red Adair. He was requisitioned from the US, brought in, flown into our ship. Then we transferred him to, he and his team and equipment onto the oil rig, and then he carried out the capping of the, the blowout. Similarly, in the late 90s, there was a cyclone in the Gulf of Khambat, which the size of the waves carried 6 ships onto the river. And when the water receded, they had run aground. 15 ships sank in the Gulf of Khambat. More than 1,000 lives were lost. So we have come a long way from this 1982, 1998, etc. And in 2021, despite adequate warning, we still lost a lot of lives. Captain Imam brought out the incident of Exxon Valdez in Alaska in 1989. By 1990, the US government had enacted the Oil Pollution Act. It's called the OPA 90. It was enacted within 1 year. Similarly, in the UK, the SOSREP was enacted when an incident happened. In the New Zealand, in Australia, they enacted their laws to tackle these situations when something drastic happened. We also need to take a lead from there. We have SOSREP and OPA 90 to lean on and define a system which is suitable to us. Unfortunately, despite the many incidents along our long coastline, the vast sea areas, we are still far away from a proper legislation. We do have legislations, as was brought out by various speakers earlier, but we do not have a proper legislation. I come back to MT Janessa, highlight a little more than what Captain Imam said. The entire team was there within 36 hours of the explosion having taken place in the engine room. The port had deployed enough tugs over there. They were trying to put water into the engine room. They flooded the engine room. The ship was sitting by its stern. But it took 2 weeks for the vessel to be handed over to the salvors who were sitting over there from 36 hours onwards. Why did it take 2 weeks? The ship was sitting with 30,000 tons, 40,000 tons of fuel. Anything would have happened. She could have toppled, turned over. There would have been a huge disaster. But it took 2 weeks because the port authorities did not want to hand over the ship till they were assured of their compensation. Amsterdam Bridge, Mumbai Harbour, again been highlighted over here. I'll just say that it took 4 months for the ship to be released and sent off. In that period, anything could have happened. We are pure lucky that these delays of ours have not led to disasters. Though, as Captain Imam brought out, Nalini, she went and ran aground in Goa. So in both these cases of Janessa and Amsterdam Bridge, it was the port authorities that did the initial response. And of course, the Coast Guard was there. In both the incidents, the Coast Guard was there. In both the cases, it was the port authorities that either did not take adequate decisions or did not take it fast enough, or there were other factors which I'm not aware of. But there were delays, and delays could have caused a problem. Each incident, including the current ones, have led to inquiries, investigations. The analyses will be drawn, lessons will be learned and promulgated. But what clearly emerges from every incident is that there is no centralized responsible decision-making authority, which can react and control the initial incident. till the owners, the insurers, the salvors, etc. take over. There is no central authority that has a wherewithal to react to these emergencies. Even if there was an authority, they do not have the resources required to react. And most importantly, there is a huge effort towards domain protection. Domain protection. Finally, and this is not recorded anywhere, I already mentioned it very briefly, that it is the ports who are reluctant because of the efforts that they have put in. See, the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard, though they may get compensated subsequently by the during the salvage claim, but they do not ask for upfront money that has been spent of their resources to be given back. Only then it can go further, while the ports do that. So what should be the ideal response mechanism which suits the Indian environment? I think there is an authority that is required, which is autonomous, which is responsible, and which is accountable. Responsible and accountable. A lot of people have talked of authority, but nobody has used these other two words of responsibility and accountability. There is no point having an authority which is not responsible and which is not accountable for its actions. It's like the captain of the ship. He's responsible for everything. He's accountable for everything. So there is a need for an improved legislation. The existing legislation, it has been proved, is inadequate. It should vest authority, responsibility, and accountability. Its direction should be binding on all organizations. Whichever are the organizations that are responsible or involved in providing, in responding to an emergency at sea, must be under this authority. For that moment, I don't mean at all times, for that moment. An SOP which is existing in the DG shipping manuals on how to react to an emergency is grossly inadequate. Several players like the Indian Navy are not even part of the crisis group that has been set up by, that gets set up by DG shipping. And as I mentioned, the OPA 90 and SOSREP are documents that we can, lean on to draft our own legislation. It's an idea which is not out of the box. It has been proposed for several years, as Captain Imam also brought out. He has been knocking the doors of the Ministry of Shipping on this aspect. Set up an authority. IMERA is one suggestion. There could be any name given to it. Provided legislative powers, provided infrastructure and funding akin to the International Oil Compensation Fund for the authority and its infrastructure. The IN and Coast Guard, Indian Navy and the Coast Guard, have been the first responders to any maritime incident. They have hordes of experience. One of the two must lead the authority. Not sure what structure the Maritime Command, which is likely to be announced in the very near future, is going to take place. That will only come out with the announcement. But it will surely be responsible for the security and safety of the entire sea areas around us. Maybe the answer lies in vesting the powers with that authority. Like the NDMA, the armed forces, and every other organization that is required to react to emergencies, this authority must have some reactive capability in terms of infrastructure. The minimum infrastructure that I feel should be a couple of tugs, 2 tugs, maybe standby on the west coast, 2 on the east coast, FIFI capable, owned, chartered for the monsoon period. Well, these things could be worked out, whether they are chartered or owned, but it should not be that you identify a tug and then let it out into the commercial world. And then when you require an incident, react to an incident of Mangalore, the tug is deployed in the Gulf of Cambodia. Not possible. Then I talked of bricks. Bricks are basically predefined, set of equipment, or in the case of HADR, it is rations. But in the case of what we are discussing, a brick would be a set of equipment that can be decided by experts. So you carry 1 brick or 2 bricks, load them, carry them away. The brick size could be such that a helicopter could deliver it on scene. The brick size could be such that it could be loaded on the tugs which are there in port and be deployed. And these bricks could be kept in various warehouses in various places. They easily deployable from a warehouse ashore, lift and move capability, assist in providing initial response. I already told you BRIC in terms of the Indian HADR. At the international level, all companies subscribe to the International Oil Compensation Fund. In India, we do have a system where all the oil companies contribute towards offshore defense. This is a huge amount of money had been collected. And very recently, a couple of years ago, the patrol boats for the offshore defense were procured by the government of India through this fund. So I suggest a small levy of 1 rupee for every metric ton of cargo that is handled. And in the current year, we are handling, or last year we handled 1,500 million metric tons. So that could mean about 150 crores every year, increasing as we increase our capacity to 2,500 million metric tons and 3,000 million metric tons by 2025, 2030, etc. And so this amount of money, 150 crores, 200 crores, 300 crores every year, could be utilized to build up this infrastructure, to maintain it, to refurbish it, etc., etc. That's a lot of money. It can be utilized very well. The tugs could also be funded from this. So to conclude, I would say let's set up an authority, give it legislative powers, provided the infrastructure, funding via small cess. Either the IN or the Coast Guard could be the leader. The Maritime Command, which is likely to be set up soon, could be the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rear Admiral Kapil Saab. Excellent. We thank you for your participation and the valuable inputs you have given for this situation, how to handle it in case of a disaster in the exclusive economic zone of India. Now, I just wondering, as you are speaking, I was wondering if there is a blowout in one of those platforms, a serious condition where you don't have equipment to handle, as you admitted that Indian Navy or the Coast Guard may not have the right kind of equipment. A vessel is requisitioned coming from overseas, maybe from the Gulf, it is mobilized, coming to the oil field. So the situation is whether they should enter Bombay port to get customs cleared and immigration cleared and then proceed to the offshore site, or they can reach the offshore site directly. There is no link for this emergency situations. We had suggested to incorporate such provisions in the Merchant Shipping Act. When an emergency like this were to happen, the DG shipping, which is the maybe the first point of contact in kind of situations like this, will be able to get this permissions as a one-time effort. Everything can be cleared. The equipment and the material reaches the site and starts handling the emergency situation. We do not know what will happen in the MS bill or any other act which will have this emergency provisions to be handled by the single nodal agency. As you are telling, the Maritime Command or Indian Maritime Emergency Authority will be able to coordinate and give one-time solution as single-handedly, understanding the situation with responsibility and accountability. Now, I welcome the Vice Chancellor of Indian Maritime University, the most knowledgeable person amongst the group with wide exposure and experience. She has handled all the subjects firsthand as the Director General of Shipping for Government of India. And she is also the National Shipping Board present chairman. She is the Vice Chancellor of a university and an accomplished person academically and as well as professionally. And she needs no further introduction. Everybody has interacted with her. Everybody has met her. We welcome Dr. Malini Shankar, IAS retired. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Captain Venkat Iyer. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my views on the subject. And felicitations to IMCR for organizing such an informative webinar, such great speakers to listen to. I'm going to start, if you will give me some time, to start with the experience I had with the oil spill outside Ennore port. And that is my real insight. It's like plunging into the deep waters and learning what an oil spill is about and how we go about managing the disaster. And I have two major points to make on it. One is the awareness and two is the coordination issues. When the oil spill occurred, there were very few people, leave the Coast Guard alone, they are the first ones on the spot. But the rest of them, there was very little awareness about the SOPs. In fact, we could not trace the SOPs and it was left because the cargo which was being carried belonged to the Petroleum Ministry. The Petroleum Ministry actually gave the MMDs the SOPs. So that is a level of the awareness. Now there was, regarding equipment, there was no ready to retrievable inventory of equipment, and where there was, it was retrievable, the inventory, the equipment, they didn't know where it was, and when the equipment was finally found, the person who knew how to operate the equipment was missing, and when they wanted to buy additional equipment, they did not, there was no ready list of where they can go and source on an urgent basis buy these equipment. And we're talking about booms, simple as that. We're not going into skimmers and things like that. So this is the awareness part. The second is coordination. At the cost of, perhaps, I don't mean to hurt anybody, but there was a lot of turf protection. There was a lot of, more emphasis was on who will communicate and who will take the credit for this. And this is every single agency which was there on the field, the national agencies as well as the local state government agencies. There was more effort put into that, as much effort put into that as the real dealing with the disaster. There was no disaster management plan that was there. So these are the two things very briefly. A third is, we are speaking about special legislation for this. I would like to impress upon the stakeholders and the experts that I think as a country, we are over legislated. We cannot have legislation for each thing. There is a Disaster Management Act, which is all encompassing. And more than the legislation or the legislative enabling provisions, it is the implementation where we lack. And that's why I focused on where is the awareness and where is the coordination. So it is enforcement of those provisions rather than having special legislations. The Disaster Management Act, as you can see in recent times, gives adequate powers to whoever is in place to actually enforce it, but it is not enforced. That's my third point. As far as what should be done, a few recommendations. The disaster management plan is expected to be in place at the level of every organization. I know there are, not about ports, but, look at my own university. They thought the disaster management plan prepared by the collector is sufficient and they don't have to prepare anything else. Every single organization needs to have a disaster management plan, which is dovetailed and accepted by the district administration. Now, this is mostly cut, paste, copied. It's on paper, it's sitting in libraries, and nobody has read it, if there exists one. Second is, whether it is fire or whether it is oil spill, there needs to be a drill, very periodic drill, which takes place in the armed forces, which takes place in forces, but it is ignored by every single organization, including the ports. And I'm making a statement here because the ports at that point of time, this was January 2017, the port simply had not had a drill for oil spill or emergency or any disaster in the previous year. So the DG office actually got into the act and had to nudge the ports. Remember, the DG shipping does not control the ports. Now, there are structural issues that people have to understand. So we had to nudge the ports to have, one, an inventory of equipment, two, the disaster management plan, three, of where the equipment will be available, and four, a periodic drill. This is not done by every single organization. A third is, there needs to be, more than the legislation, there need to be refresher and updation workshops. At the end of this, we decided that, there was a lot of ignorance or lack of awareness about these things. So including insurance people, they didn't know. Our insurance agencies in India who are aware of hull insurance, but very, very weak on P&I insurance. So we had to conduct a workshop where we actually called representatives of international agencies like ITOPF and, the Oil Pollution Fund people. And it was, this kind of workshop has to take place every 6 months, because people change, people retire, people get transferred, there has to be refresher. It's there in every single, profession. We don't do this. We don't insist on this. Even the best of stakeholders and experts don't suggest this. Instead of suggesting legislation, which may or may not be necessary, I think these are the things which have to be ensured. My next 2 points very briefly are suggesting, an IMERA or an agency like that, yes, it can be explored, but there is a specialized agency called the NDMA. A multiplication of agencies is not going to help this country. Maybe NDMA has to have a separate vertical, which is, related to the maritime sector. Because right now the NDMA is the one which, along with the SDMA, which is the State Disaster Management Authority, they are on the field immediately. If Coast Guard is going to be, Coast Guard is the critical factor, but it has to be dovetailed to NDMA. Even if you create an IMERA, there will be a gap between the coordination of within the sector and coordination with the NDMA and SDMA and state agencies. And my last point in response to Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta on the tugs. Now, there was a provision to place a tug on the west coast for 3 months of the monsoon and the east coast for 3 months of the monsoon on the east coast, the northeast monsoon. What we observed in the last 5 years, previous 5 years, this was a decision taken in 2018, is that the monsoon is no longer, due to climate change issues, the monsoon is no longer limited to 3 months on the west coast and 3 months, the designated 3 months on the east coast. For example, the cyclone Oki, which hit Kerala, hit beyond the monsoon period. And the cyclones which were hitting the east coast came before the northeast monsoons. So we said this cannot be 3 months plus 3 months, it has to be year round. And the experiment of having a tugboat to be placed, it was placed only in 1 or 2 places. And if there was an emergency in Kolkata, and if there is the tugboat is in Mumbai, you can imagine how long it takes for the tugboat to reach Kolkata. So we said there has to be year-round tugboats. So what was put in place was a mechanism where one port on the west coast and one port on the east coast will acquire by purchase or lease a tugboat, and the DG Shipping will give an annuity for 5 years, which covers the purchase cost over the 5 years. The tugboat will be in place in the concerned port, and the first instance it was Mumbai port and Chennai port, and they could use it because it belongs to the port. They could use it for their own purposes, which is how, so it actually increases the efficiency of the use of the tugboat. They could use it for their own purposes with the rider that whenever it was required for towing purposes in an emergency, they would have to release it along with the manpower, and they have to operate it under the control or instructions of the government of or the DGS, as the case may be. And in phase 2, it was, I have not kept track of this. Phase 2, it was expected 2 more ports, perhaps Cochin Port and Paradip or Kolkata Port will have these tugs. So you will have 2 tugboats on each of the coast, and this will be available for emergency operations for year round, not just for 3 months and 3 months. That's old hat, and that will not work under the climate change situation. There are a few other things, I don't know what is the situation now, but in 2018, when I visited the Paradip port, the Coast Guard ship, brand new one, was there, but it could not be operated because there were no people, no trained persons to operate. So the reason I'm saying this is not to criticize any agency. All of us work under the government and we work under several restrictions. But it is the enforcement of the SOPs, the knowledge of the SOPs, the enforcement of the SOPs, and immense coordination that is required without a turf protection game. So that is where the situation is. And I would say that we work within these parameters and framework to see how we can actually improve the disaster management prevention plan as well as the post-event management plan. I'm open to suggestions, constructive suggestions, which do not duplicate or multiply the agencies and the legislations, because that is not something that the government might consider very, very favorably. But yes, the National Shipping Board can, this is a very important topic for the National Shipping Board to take its advisory role seriously and send its recommendations to the government. That is an assurance. So thank you for giving me the time and the opportunity to share my views. Thank you, Captain Iyer.
Thank you, Dr. Malini Shankar. We appreciate your comments and suggestions. What we would like to say is the National Disaster Management Act is a very old act, and National Disaster Management Plans have been upgraded from 2016 to 2019. Yet there is no connect between the seaward disasters and the National Management Plan. And as NSB, we would like you to take it up with the appropriate authorities and include, as you suggested, a vertical in the National Disaster Plan with all the SOPs and the equipment to be used by cooperating with the Indian Navy and in the Indian Coast Guard, who have perhaps some kind of an equipment at least, and some kind of dedicated and trained manpower to handle the situation. This should be incorporated in the National Disaster Management Plan rather than looking at spontaneous decisions when an incident happens to move forward. So this will be a good suggestion. Maybe, as you rightly said, NSB can look into it at least now, after about 10 years or 15 years of National Disaster Management Plan has been enforced. And as you rightly said, there is no point in increasing the number of enactments. It's rightly said, it's correct. We also would like to see, as a mariner, we have this Anti-Aircraft Hijacking Act, but we don't have anything like hijacking of ships at sea. What happens if a ship is hijacked by the terrorists or by another revolutionary people or by pirates? There is no act for the Indian government to step on board this vessel and rescue our mariners. Whereas we have got, after about 11 or 13 hijacking of Indian aircraft, we have enacted this Anti-Aircraft Hijacking Act. So there itself, we can add one more chapter. NSB can suggest add one more chapter for anti-hijacking of vessels in the high seas, how India will intervene and salvage our Indian asset and also rescue our Indian seafarers. Thank you. Now I request Captain.
I'd just like to add that the National Disaster Management Act is not very old. It's a National Shipping Act, which is too old. It is 1958, and this one is 2005, and it's being modified from time to time. So, but yes, it's perhaps a work in progress, and there can be suggestions to include certain, to integrate with the coast and the maritime areas.
Thank you, madam. You are in the right place. You can think both sides, and you'll be able to marinate both and create a vertical so that the management plan envisages all the situations and gives power to a single authority with knowledge and dedicated experience to handle such situations, which is missing in the National Disaster Management Plan. Even in the 2019 edition, there is no mention about these areas of activity. Thank you. I request Neil J. Nair. He is also a member of the AMISI group, and he is a deep thinker and a very, very good person with handling experience in the offshore East Coast. I request Neil J. Nair to summarize the second portion of the webinar. Neil.
Thank you, Captain Venkat. I think it's been pretty interesting, really very good presentations made by all the speakers. We had a very elite panel. I think there were lots of good inputs from Captain Iyer, Venkat Iyer, Inspector General Donnie Michael, Captain Suresh Amirapu, Captain Farhat Imam, Mr. Ishwar Achanta, Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta, and of course our very own Mrs. Malini Shankar. They all touched upon extremely pertinent points to do with our readiness and our capabilities and weaknesses in responding to disaster management on the maritime sector. They all brought out through the very lucid examples of where we messed up, the kind of problems that we faced, including the bureaucratic and legal problems. And since we are short of time now and we're running out of time, we still have a question and answer session to go. I'll just try to bring out a few commonalities among the various presentations to kind of determine, say, 5 or 6 key areas that we need to focus on to kind of redress the situation and move on to better days ahead. One deficiency that seemed to consistently come across was that there's been a kind of compartmentalization in our decision-making process. in any disaster, too many different parties getting involved, multiple power centers, lack of adequate knowledge by each power center on the totality of the challenge being faced, and hence delays in making decisions like, as Captain Venkat put, whether a ship should clear customs in Bombay before it goes to Ratnagiri to put off a fire, or whether, like for example, Dr. Malini brought out the issue of the Gone Kanchipuram. We had over 15 key departments in the state and center involved in the overall cleanup efforts. My company happened to be the overseeing authority in behalf of the PNI Club, which did the final cleanup. And there were a huge number of issues that we faced, which were sorted out one by one as we went along. And once the entire cleanup operation was over, we had this WhatsApp group where everybody was part of, and Dr. Malini Shankar rightly brought out the various deficiencies and issues that we faced during the cleanup operations. So finally, I suggested that before we wind up the group, could we all meet together to at least document the issues that we faced, and then kind of put a roadmap to how we are going to solve it so that it doesn't happen the next time around, and we are better prepared. Unfortunately, 80% of those members in the WhatsApp group exited the group the same day. So I think there is a kind of characteristic, Indian characteristic in moving from one crisis to another without resolving any. Before we resolve one, we are into another, and we never get the time to document, learn from, and make changes to prevent similar things happening. So we never learn from history, to say it shortly. The second aspect is that like we see on ships, we have a very lateral management policy on ships where every individual on the ship has their area of responsibility which they take care of. But when it comes to a contingency, the entire management structure becomes vertical and hierarchical, because you cannot have a lateral management leadership style in a contingency. You need somebody on top to decide and execute. Similar in case of contingencies, as IG Donny brought out and Mr. Malini Shankar brought out. We need the structure where we need a SOSREP type organization, a single SOSREP who's the head of the decision-making body, with a key team of experts from different ministries who will form immediately on a contingency happening. And this SOSREP will be empowered to overrule every other department in the government of India, whether it's customs, whether it's immigration, whether it's ports, whether it's pollution control, environmental ministry, because experts from each of these ministries will be part of his core team managing the contingency, single point of command and control. And this needs to be brought into the National Disaster Management Plan, where we need to have a very good management structure in place. And lastly, as allocation of resources. IG Donny again brought out that we had 3 vessels like the Sagar Samrika, I think, and they are capable of handling 1,000, 2,000 to 5,000 ton oil spills on the Indian coast. We are talking of 200,000 ton oil spills. Do we even have a contingency plan to handle such spills? I think it's time that all the thinkers involved today, many more were not here. We need to put our heads together. We have learned a lot from today's sessions. It's time to come out with solutions and move on to a more organized response when the next contingency comes across. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. A great summing up. Let me introduce Captain Kamal Chadha. He's from the MAREX media, a senior mariner amongst us. He's supportive of many such ventures, and he's one of the strong guides of AMISI. He's a member. I hand over to Kamal Chadha for question and answers if he has collected any. Thank you. Over to Kamal.
Thank you very much, Venkat. Looks like all the questions have gotten answered already. All the questions that I have been looking at, I noticed that spoken on the subject in depth. So and having a time overrun over here. So if any questions do come up, we take them up and pass them by email or to the relevant responders, and we'll take it accordingly. So I think I will turn the mic back to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Now over to Captain Ramakrishnan. He's our founder treasurer. He's running his business Benline Agencies. He has a lot of experience in dealing with the emergency preparedness. He has handled a lot of vessels which came for salvage all by himself. I request him to propose the vote of thanks for all those who have attended this webinar. Over to Ram. Ram, are you there? Okay, thank you. Ram is missing. Suri, please propose vote of thanks and close the meeting, and you can sum up.
Venkat, actually we changed that. Rajgopal there?
Rajgopal is not there.
Is it okay? No problem.
You just propose, yeah.
No problem. Actually, it's been a little longer than we thought, but the time was worth it. I would say that because, you know, about the 99 we had when we started, it has not gone down before below 86 now, which means people are committed to the cause. That is more important. And I must thank for a lot of comments posted. Of course, very few questions because the speakers, I suppose, were very good and they cleared all the doubts in their speech. Of course, we have a little bit of, I won't say disagreement or misagreement, areas to be sorted out, how the hierarchy can work better with resources and management. Like Neil was saying, probably a vertical management is called for. It cannot be lateral or horizontal. When in disaster, there is no time. So once again, thank you to all of you for staying back so long, and all the speakers, participants, specialists, invitees, and from Navy, Coast Guard, Mrs. Malini Shankar. In fact, I hope we haven't delayed you for too long because we didn't expect to go so long. It's almost a 1 hour plus. So we will have the next webinar in the first week of July 3rd, I think. That will be on mariners' welfare. Believe it or not, we will turn the world upside down. It's not the way the industry runs, because the other day we heard about Wallam's manager saying seafarers are scum of the world. They should go on strike all over the world. I think it has reached the limit. It's high time we have a respectable position in the land when we land ashore, and let's do something about it. Already Venkat and me have been working on it, and we promise that we have a lot of amendments to merchant shipping bill, which Malini Shankar has pointed out. It is outdated. We'll work on it. Thank you very much. You're all welcome to chat or send me a mail or call me anytime with any inputs on this or with ideas for the future. Here is Captain Bullet signing off. Thank you.
Before we close the session, I wish to place on record our sincere thanks to Kirtan Vakil and Sanjeev Vakil for enabling this platform as usual. And they're also, all of them are awake and all of them are standing behind as a back end engineers to help us out in case of any glitch. And the whole presentation for the media, and Captain Kamal Chadda for taking it across to everybody, and our senior most person Captain Vivekanand to be present and helping us out in the whole thought process. We thank HIMT for the sponsorship. We thank one and all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, recording is available. Thank you. Bye.